Okay. Are you ready to get started?
Are you ready?
Okay, I'd like to call this meeting of the Mercer Island School Board of Directors on September 13th to order. And I am looking for a motion to establish the agenda.
I move we establish the agenda.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Great, so we have our agenda, and our first item this evening is to recognize our student representatives who are new to our board.
So if Caroline and Meghana could join me up here for their oath of office.
Great.
So I will say it, and then you can repeat it after me, all right?
Okay.
I, Caroline Atkinson,
I, Caroline Atkinson,
having been selected to be a student representative
having been selected to be a student representative
on the Board of Directors of the Mercer Island School District,
on the Board of Directors of the Mercer Island School District,
do solemnly
affirm
that I will faithfully and impartially discharge the duties
that I will faithfully and impartially discharge the duties
and responsibility of this office to the best of my ability
and responsibilities of this office to the best of my abilities,
and as prescribed by Board Policy and Procedure 1250.
and as prescribed by Board Policy and Procedure 1250. Okay. I, Meghana Kakuwal,
Having been selected to be a student representative on the Board of Directors
having been selected to be a student representative on the Board of
of
Directors
the Mercer Island School District,
of the Mercer Island School District,
do solemnly affirm that I will faithfully and impartially
do solemnly affirm that I will faithfully and impartially
discharge the duties and responsibilities
discharge the duties and responsibilities
of this office to the best of my ability
of this office to the best of my ability,
and as prescribed by Board Policy and Procedure 1250.
and as prescribed by Board Policy and Procedure 1250.
Welcome.
So I would like to take a minute to have Meghana introduce her parents who have come here for this very auspicious occasion.
Yeah, my parents are in the audience over there. That's my dad, Vijay Kakuwal, and my mom, Nagashri. And I would like to thank them for all the support they've given me my whole life.
And Meghana is our junior representative, so we have the privilege of having her for 2 years to be with us up here. Caroline is a senior, so she will be here for this very first year as we welcome student reps to our board. So very excited to have them here for their first meeting, and they will be giving their first report here shortly as well.
So first we have public input. And we have one person signed in. If anybody else was here to do public input, please sign in at the front desk there. And John, you can make your way to the podium while I read our explanation of public input. The meeting is a meeting of the board in public. It is not a public meeting that guarantees interaction between members of the public and members of the board. If you would like to address the board on a particular issue, please limit your remarks to not more than 3 minutes. Appoint a spokesperson if the concern is a group concern, and if desired, provide written documentation to the board secretary. Public comments that name or otherwise identify a district student are not permitted without permission of that student's parent or legal guardian. The board may direct the superintendent to respond at a later date to the issues expressed. And with that, go right ahead.
Thank you, Madam President. My name is John Stewart. I've lived on the island for 25 years. I'm the proud father of 4 Mercer Island High School graduates. I'm also the proud carpool driver for one of your newest board members many years ago. I don't know if you remember that. So I'm very excited to see the student representatives on the council. I'm here. I'm a member of the Yes campaign for the city's Proposition 1. I'm the only person here from that campaign because others are at a campaign meeting. That means one of two things. Either I'm the least important person because everyone else is at the campaign meeting, or my preferred interpretation is I'm the most important member because I'm here before you, before the Board of Directors. Proposition 1, I think, as you know, affects funding for counselors in the schools, and so will impact Island students. And I'm just here to encourage the board through its own public and deliberative process to consider taking an official position on Proposition 1. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, and I don't think there's no response to that at this time. Our next item will be our student representative report.
And before we start that, I would like to give Caroline the opportunity to, are your folks here tonight?
They're not.
They're not. Well, perhaps you'd like to say something to them at home. Maybe they're watching on TV, so go ahead.
Okay. My mom and dad are Megan and Rob Atkinson. Yeah, same as Megan. I would like to thank them for everything. I don't think you're watching, but maybe if you are, thanks for watching.
And now for our student report.
Okay. Hi, our names are Caroline and Meghana, and we'll be your student representatives this year. We're going to give you a short overview of what students have been doing at each of the schools in the district.
At West Mercer and Northwood, 1st through 5th grade students started school on September 5th, and we're so happy to be back with their friends and teachers. Both schools had many new families to Mercer Island, and kindergarten's first full day was on September 10th. It was reported that scooping applesauce and navigating lunch was very exciting. Preschoolers began today.
Lake Ridge has 461 students this year. The Fall Family Picnic tomorrow is for all students, families, and teachers at 5:30 p.m., and 3rd graders have a bike rodeo with the Mercer Island Police Department and PTA.
Lake Ridge has 6 clubs that are going to be starting up in October: Student Green Team, K-Kids Club, Garden Club, Chess Club, 5th Grade Rocketry Club, and the Walkers Club. Music programs such as steel drum, band, choir, and orchestra have also started for the school year.
Island Park has 398 total students this year, 10 new staff members, and 6 of these are teachers. Their curriculum night is on September 20th. Clubs are about to be underway, and students are being selected for student government.
At IMS, school started on September 5th as well, beginning with 6th grade orientation and web leaders welcoming them. Islander Middle School has 1,137 active students right now. There are 13 new staff members, 9 of which are teachers, and there are 11 clubs active at the moment at IMS.
Yesterday, the 6th grade and new families pizza feed night was held at IMS. It was a fun, low-key event intended to make connections among 6th graders, web leaders, staff, and new families. Web leaders are also handing out donuts on September 21st to build a stronger community. Tomorrow, IMS ASB is also hosting a back-to-school assembly for 7th and 8th graders. This year at the high school, there are 1,566 students enrolled. There's 402 freshmen, 368 sophomores, 362 juniors, and 394 seniors, plus 40 students in various programs.
There are 55 new students who are not freshmen, including 9 exchange students from Italy, Germany, Sweden, Spain, Finland, and Chile.
There are 23 new staff members at MAHS, consisting of 13 new teachers, 1 associate principal, 2 student teachers, and 7 other classified staff.
August consisted of summer sports and band practices in smoky weather. There were rearrangements of location and timings, and there was an extra day of band camp, but there were no serious setbacks.
School started on September 5th with the morning dedicated to welcoming the freshmen and new students. There's a welcome back assembly tomorrow.
We have over 50 clubs at our high school, which are all in the midst of getting started, so in October there will be more updates about those.
Sports this season have also started. The MI football team is so far undefeated, winning against Mount Lake Terrace and Issaquah in the past 2 weeks. They have a home game tomorrow against Newport.
Cross country had a meet yesterday against Juanita. Varsity girls soccer tied against Skyline on Saturday and won against Juanita on Tuesday. Boys golf won their match on September 5th against Newport and lost to Interlake on Tuesday.
Boys tennis lost on September 7th against Newport and won against Sammamish on Tuesday. Girls swive won against Liberty on September 6th and won against Interlake on Tuesday. And varsity girls volleyball lost to Skyline yesterday and has a home match today.
There is an exciting field trip that is coming up, and Drama 2 is going to Ashland tomorrow to attend plays at the Oregon Shakespeare Festival. They are planning to see 4 shows and participate in an acting workshop and will return on Monday night.
Plans are in the works for homecoming. The sophomore class in ASB is ordering decorations and deciding on a theme, which will be revealed tomorrow at the assembly. Homecoming week is the week of October 1st through 5th. The parade is on October 5th at 5 p.m. downtown at Mercerdale Park. And the football game is after the parade, and the dance is on Saturday, October 6th at 8 p.m. at the high school.
The MIHS Senate is also in the works with representatives from each Bridges class to give a broader student perspective on important school issues. Our goal at the end of this month is to reach student reps in every building. However, we've only been in school for 7 days, so we're waiting on that. Once those students are in place, we'll have a better student voice to share.
Thank you.
Well, that was a wonderful student voice to hear. Thank you very much for being here and for that lovely report. Do you have any other comments before we close that part?
No, just a reminder that our students will be excused at a certain point in the meeting, but they do have other activities as well. So that's one reason why they're sitting here on this side. So when they need to leave, they can easily and discreetly leave, because I know Meghana has a band rehearsal that she needs to get to as well. So thank you very much, you guys. Great job.
All right. So next up, we have item 2, superintendent report.
So just a couple of items. Again, as you heard from our student reps, school had a really smooth start last year. Thanks to all of our employees for really facilitating that. All grades started on Wednesday, except for kindergarten, which is the class of 2031. Think about that. Their world is going to be very different. So our kindergartners started on Friday. So just to make the board aware of some adjustments to the Superintendent Advisory for 2018-19, later in the meeting you're going to talk about your liaison role, so I wanted to give you the adjustments that will be made. Previously, the Superintendent Diversity Advisory Committee has been in existence, I think, since 2015, but the name is going to be adjusted to be the Superintendent Equity Advisory. And for 2018-19, it will continue to include a site administrator from each site, which was added last year, but new to the advisory this year will be representation from each site. So we can really get a district-wide perspective that then is having impact at the sites and being able to exchange those ideas across the district. The purpose and the goal is to really have this work and message impact at the classroom level. Each site will recommend a parent from their site's Equity Advisory Council to represent their site at the district level advisory. Also new to the advisory will be an English language learner teacher to help us make sure that we're hearing that voice, and a teacher coach as well. There will continue to be some community members not representing a specific site, and the site reps and the community members will again, as they have in past, be eligible to serve a 3-year term. This advisory is scheduled to meet 5 times in the school year. The biggest change is to the Superintendent Advisory Council. This group has been so big that we couldn't even all fit in the boardroom. It was really hard to fit everyone in. It was kind of a combination of a lot of different entities. So in order to really make this group impactful, it's going to be divided into two groups. One group is going to be the Superintendent Community Advisory, or the key communicators. And this will be made up of a variety of community representatives, as was on the Superintendent Advisory before. It will include reps from Youth and Family Services, Rotary, Chamber of Commerce, City, Boys and Girls Club, the JCC, all of the different groups that work with youth as we do and support our community. This group will have 3 meetings a year, and of course there will be staff in this advisory as well. Because of splitting the Superintendent Advisory, this is a group that the board will have to make a decision as to whether or not a board representative will be on this advisory. The next advisory is going to be a combination of the Learning Services Advisory with the Superintendent Advisory, because the work we do is educate kids, so it's going to be about teaching and learning. So renamed as the Superintendent Teaching and Learning Advisory, we will have several staff members from Learning Services. We will also have a teacher rep from each site and a parent rep, which on the Superintendent Advisory previously was the PTA president. So our PTA presidents will be working with this group. They will also meet 4 to 5 times a year. And our goal with this group is to really be able to focus on how to assure quality teaching and learning in every classroom for every student. So this was formerly called the Superintendent Advisory. Now it's labeled the STLA. And the last Superintendent Advisory is the Superintendent Student Advisory, which is the new group this year. This will consist of student reps from each site, and our board representatives on the Student Advisory will be our student representatives. And so this group will meet 4 times in the year and will really provide the student voice and opinions on issues and concerns across the district, as well as allow for them to be concerned and then brought back to hear from our student reps as well. So those are the advisories as they will work, and you will see on the agenda when we get to the liaison the actual dates of the meetings. So as you're discussing who will be liaison for what, the dates are available there as well. Any questions? All right, thank you.
Okay, so our next item is item 3, partial governance process monitoring. And item A is Board Policy 1800 OE10, Instructional Program. And tonight we have a presentation on the 2017-2018 Highly Capable Program Review. Do you have anything to add to that?
You can see Fred is bringing the team forward to sit at the table. As the documents reveal, this was an extensive report that was engaged in last spring, and so Fred and his team that were really integral in this, particularly Nova, who spent a lot of time coordinating all of this. Jamie came in her role as of July, and so I know they've spent some time doing some of the work together, but I do have to thank Nova for how much time and energy she has put into this in working with our consultants. And I will turn it over to Fred.
Great, thank you. Good evening, and thanks for having us here tonight. Just a couple reminders about overall program reviews. Under Board Policy 2019, that's our policy that governs not just curriculum reviews, which is what you typically see when the Instructional Materials Committee weighs in, but it also does program reviews. And tonight is the first of 2 that you're going to see. In 2 weeks from tonight, you'll see our program review on special education, and we look forward to sharing that. But tonight is on our highly capable program, and taking a closer look at how are our students being served across all schools in the district. So we started the work last year. I want to turn it over to Nova, who was really instrumental, as Superintendent Koloski indicated, in launching this. So the format kind of tonight is I want to give Nova a chance just to give you some more perspective on it, and then turn it over to our friends from the Center for Educational Effectiveness, who you know through the mainly through our EES survey, but they're here tonight. Ronnie Rumsey, who former district administrator in a neighboring school district, who's now working with the center, and then of course Greg Lobdell, who's been here before. So Nova.
Yeah, so,
I think so.
so I'll give you a kind of a general overview as to how we got to where we are in terms of having this review. We annually,
Thank you. Annually, we do we have to submit our program plan to OSPI, and they approve that annually. You've also seen those reports. If you were here last September, then you saw one come through. Also, we recently, 3 years ago, had a CPR, which is a comprehensive program review. So that's when OSPI comes in and says, we want to see everything and know that you're doing everything you're supposed to. The challenge with those is while they're helpful, they really just check to make sure you're compliant. They don't really tell us anything else that's helpful about the whole thing. So last year, when the ESSA requirements came down and we knew some things would be changing about our programs, it became relevant that we start looking a little deeper into the programming and say, are we really doing what we should be doing to support all kids? And so that's when Ronnie and I met at one of our joint meetings, and we started talking a little bit about doing a program review that would give us some perceptual data specifically and kind of give us a finer point on what's happening with our program, how people feel about it, how kids are doing, what's some data around all of that, and that's where they came in. So there you go.
Let's see. Thank you for having us. So the reason we came in was, as Nova said, we met, and she really wanted to look at, the district really wanted to look at how were the HiCap students being served across the district, as well as other students, making sure that everything was really equitable across the board. And also to gather some perceptual data, we also used the EES survey along with another survey that Greg will talk to you a little bit about, and put all of the data together to come up with some recommendations that we'll give you. And then we also wanted to be sure that the program was in alignment with the national standards, because it's really important as we're looking at those to make sure that not only are our general education students being served with standards, but also our highly capable students. So Greg's going to tell you a little bit about the methodology we used, and then I'll dive into what we found and some recommendations that we've made. You want that?
Great. It's really a pleasure to be here and to be back with all of you. The program reviews that we've designed, we do these for a variety of topics, are really designed to be a relatively low impact but kind of high relevance and rigor approach to looking at a specific program, and in this case, the HiCap review. We use 4 major modes of analysis in that process. The first of which is document review. So understanding, deeply analyzing the various documents which exist related to the program. There's certain ones that the state says you have to have, so it's kind of a compliance perspective, but there's others that really delve into the program delivery, how we serve all kids, issues of equity and access, et cetera. We also do the quantitative, qualitative side on the surveys. The interviews and focus groups are really designed to essentially be a counter to what we see in the surveys. The surveys allow all voices to be heard. The interviews allow us to dive a little more deeply with a standard framework. And then there's underlying data analysis. So looking at quantitative analysis on enrollment, gender, et cetera. Part of this is, as we look at the document review, the overall process involves, an analysis of about 20 different documents. These are critical documents to the program. We're really looking for not only are the basics covered, but is it sensitive to the community being served. The demographics and achievement, that quantitative side, the focus there is not only on performance, but also on issues of participation, proportionality or disproportionality, and overall performance. So that's really the most kind of deep quantitative side. The focus groups and interviews are really the counterbalance. So as we look at these various modes of research, we're looking at getting into a small group of people with a standard framework. Everything we do in that first diagram that I showed is through the lens of the National Association of Gifted Children programming standards. The state of Washington has adopted that as part of our basic ed program for the state of Washington. And in designing this process about 3.5 years ago, there's a professor over at Whitworth University who is one of the national leaders on the NAGC standards. OSPI contracted her to also do the OSPI, the state-level programming guides. Dr. Gail Hannanen is one of the most knowledgeable people around this work. She had designed a set of surveys and tools, but she's not a provider of those services. And so Gail had worked with us for about 15 years. Gail came to CE and said, why don't you guys use this around the state and throughout other states? So everything we do is kind of driven and then validated back with Dr. Hennanen to really fit and be closely aligned with the NAGC standards. That led us to the surveys, which is the final piece that I'll talk about. The surveys are really designed to be yet another kind of leg on this stool that we use to look at the data. So we have the focus groups, the documents, the quantitative analysis. The surveys then require a standard set of responses from a large number of people where we can allow a lot of voices to be heard. So the surveys are kind of that last piece. That all is filtered kind of through the lens of the NAGC standards, and that gives us a general perspective on what is the current reality of what's being delivered to kids in Mercer Island.
So in your packet, you will have the first part of the report that we gave back that includes all of the responses and the data that we've compiled, put together under the standards for the highly capable students. And then from there, what we did was we kind of there were several of the standards that had items that overlapped that would fit in this standard and this standard as well. Tried to narrow it down a little bit more to have a little clearer focus into some particular buckets. And so the buckets that we determined, or the major areas of focus that we determined were to look at, was the first one was at the program design. And we'll get into how that one came about in just as we keep talking. Collaboration and then professional development was one that surfaced quite a bit of comments. Differentiating for social and emotional health, that one was very clear. That one rose to the top quite substantially. So we'll talk about that. And then the equity and access issues, not just for the highly capable students, but also for the students who we might not necessarily have the label of highly capable, but who might be academically talented, who could quite possibly be successful in a program much like what is already being offered. So as you look through the executive summary, what you'll see is there's really no recommendation made for equity and access pulled out because they're sandwiched in those other buckets. So it's kind of woven throughout there. So as we talk, that's a piece that you won't find in there, but you can see how it's pulled out. So let's talk a little bit about program design. What we found from program design, and what we did when we were putting the data together, was we really looked at comments that had 2 or 3 or 4 comments that were alike before we started looking at them. Several of these had quite a huge quantity of responses that were targeted on certain things. So we took the things that surfaced and went from there. So the first one was that cognitive and academic data points are used to determine eligibility. That's a great thing, and that's also you're gonna find that that's in something that we've talked about in the recommendations according to the changes that have been made in the highly capable program in the state over the last few years. The other one is the over-identification of the total number of students for inclusion in the program. What we found was the percentage of students that are qualifying for your highly capable program is substantially bigger than those around. And so that would be something that rose to the top that we went to. That you might want to dig into that one a little bit more. One that came up in almost every standard was the homogeneous grouping limitations that there is, especially at the elementary and middle school levels. They came across very clear in parent, teacher, and student responses about students not being able to associate with their peers, how there's this elitism that comes up amongst the students and amongst the parents, where if a student doesn't qualify for the highly capable program, then they're considered this is a student response. This is not my word. A dumb student versus a smart student. So the dumb students don't make it in the program, but the smart students do. That was a comment that didn't just happen once or twice. It was fairly prevalent throughout all of the focus groups that we had. And then the last one is that the elementary programs vary greatly between the two schools. That did come up a lot in the parent pieces as well. So we'll talk about some recommendations around program design. The next one is, we talked about collaboration. And there's a lack of continuity between the buildings at the elementary level and between the levels. So not only between the elementary level, but the buildings, but the elementary going to the middle, going to the high. And in fact, your high school teachers, most of them do not even realize they have high-cap students in their programs, which they do. So it would be important to start building that collaboration so the teachers do know who those students are. There's an absence of evidence for all stakeholders having input into the program. For example, parents don't always know what's going on or feel like they have input into how students are selected. Teachers don't always feel like their voice is being heard, as well as students don't always are not always really happy with some of the way the program lays out. So that was a piece that was missing from the standards that we picked up on. And then the last one in this category is that parents are not always aware of the outside resources that may be available for their students. So the out-of-school they were pretty familiar with the Kumon and the Privet out-of-school tutoring that's available, but there wasn't much evidence of the Robinson Center or any of those other highly capable programs that students could have access to that are really close to us, that are really beneficial. So one of the comments that I made, it came up quite often, that most of the parents get their information on the bleachers, especially at the elementary level. That's where they're learning their information. So having that collaboration was something that they felt might be beneficial. The next one was professional development. And as I reviewed the materials and talked with teachers, it seems that there's not much professional development that is going on around the nature of the high-cap student, their particular academic needs, as well as those students who are not in highly capable programs. So we called it differentiation. There's not a lot of differentiation training or professional learning that's going on for the staff that would make them feel like they're more effective with all of the students within Mercer Island School District. The little bit of professional development that there has been only for the teachers in the highly capable program. So for example, the teachers at Lake Ridge or the teachers at West Mercer might go to a conference. There's a program at the University of Connecticut that I believe some teachers have been sent to. It's a go-to and come back with materials rather than a job-embedded kind of professional learning for the teachers. The next one we looked at was the differentiation for social and emotional health. And this one had a significant amount of responses around this, and if I was putting stars on this would get quite a few stars. Amongst all stakeholders who responded, there is a lot of homework, a lot of outside work that students are needing to do. In fact, students were, at the middle school, were talking about needing to stay up till midnight, 1 o'clock, to get all of their work done. Parents mentioned that they were having to go home and spend a lot of time outside of school teaching their students in order to get the materials done. It affected students so that they weren't able to participate in some of the outside activities that they wanted to, or to hang out with their friends that weren't in high cap, that they didn't have the same amount of work. Also mentioned was that some of the expectations were not age appropriate. So for example, it's a lot of times, because a highly capable student is very verbal, we see them as being much more mature than they might be, and our expectations are raised for those students, when in actuality, a lot of times their maturity level is not, because they haven't had to experience some of the challenges that the non-high cap student has. So that came up mostly from parents and from staff. Also, that students in the highly capable program are not able to learn, collaborate, and socialize with their age group peers. That was big. You know, once they qualify for highly capable, they may go to a different school, and then depending on expectations of the program in their school, they might not have time to socialize with their students. Students mentioned that even though they might have the same recess time, they still don't necessarily socialize on the playground or in the lunchroom. There was talk of field trips that highly capable students were able to participate in that non-high cap students weren't able to participate in, and how that was creating some divisiveness amongst the students and amongst staff, that not all students got to participate in those kind of things. There's a high level of stress noted from your students and from your from parents of the students. Not only it starts about in second grade, I've got to get into high cap because I've got to go to a good college, and they're going to look at whether I'm in high cap in the elementary for that college that I want to go to. If I don't get in, then my parents take me to outside tutoring so that I can pass the test. That piece came up quite often, that if a student didn't qualify, there was a packet that has to do with the COGAT, I believe, that parents would purchase, and then students talked about having to do the packet instead of getting to play after school, and their parents would help them with the packet. And when I talked to some parents, that's what it was. It was a packet to study the COGAT items. Or students going to Kumon or Privet after school in order to be able to pass the test the next time. And then the last one was there are data points that are being collected for students to qualify. They may not be the right ones, or there might be more needed. One of the part of the WAC is that you use multiple data points. Well, multiple, they don't define multiple, but it's more than one. And currently you are using more than one. There is no behavior assessment being used or evaluation being used for students, which would be the best one I know of comes from the University of Connecticut, where Dr. Renzulli is, which looks at their learning skills, their behavior styles. How do they do in math? How do they do in reading? Are they determined? Do they have perseverance? Do they have grit? Some of those things that we know students need to have, but they're a little harder to measure. It's an observational assessment, but it's something that both teachers and parents felt like was missing from the data that's collected. And then we'll talk a little bit about equity and access. Many of the areas, whoops. Oh gosh, am I pressing the right one? There we go. Many of the areas we've already addressed in a couple of the other topics that we talked about, but additionally, I want to bring up again that it came up over and over from parents and teachers and from students about being able to study for the test. So if students are able to study for the test, are they truly a highly capable student? Do we really get a true read on what their highly capableism is? Then the other one we looked at was proportionality. So of your students being served, is it proportionate? And it's in your board packet. I think you might have noticed the proportionality piece where your Caucasian students, your white students are underserved compared to some of your other students. So Asian students tend to be a little bit higher, and your there was one other population, I don't remember which it was, but so looking at your ethnicity and race to make sure that it's proportional was something that we looked at. The other piece we looked at was socioeconomic, so low income. Although you don't have a lot of low income here, it's still not proportional compared to what we would look at, and as well as EL students. So, okay. So let's jump into the recommendations that we've made. So the first one is around program design. As I said, right now there's two pieces of data being used consistently that we found. One was the COGAT and one was the ITBS. I was going to say the SAT, but I knew it was too soon for SAT. So to use some additional data sources, one would be the Renzulli Behavioral Scale, which is a great piece. You don't have to use the whole thing. You can just use pieces of it. But it will give you a score regarding how a student performs. Are they going to have the stick-to-itiveness to be in a highly capable program under the expectations that are required of them? Then the other recommendation we have is to consider some other program configurations. Right now, students qualify for highly capable, and they're in highly capable till they graduate. Although at the high school, they don't know. Nobody knows there's highly capable. Because of your population, I made the recommendation that you look at a school-wide enrichment model, which is very problem-based learning, very much. So it would serve not only your highly capable student, but also your academically talented student who are in the classroom and feel like they're not being challenged quite as much, or with a project-based learning program, what you find is some of your students who don't qualify start to rise. It's kind of like all ships in the harbor rise with the tide. That's what the research shows when you incorporate these kind of models into your programs. And then research programming options that would include all students, which I just talked about. Consider the program configurations. That was the other one. Is there a way that you can make sure that students in the program have an opportunity to be with their age-appropriate peers? So with their grade-appropriate peers in the middle school, is there a way so the students aren't all tracked into the same classes all day, so they have some extra time for electives possibly? If they're highly capable in social studies, is there an opportunity for them to get into an accelerated program with that versus just the language arts and the math piece? And then the last one too is, this is pretty important because in the elementary parent group, and I believe we had 2 elementary parent groups. This was very prevalent, that the 2 programs are very different. And so to identify non-negotiables for that program at the elementary level, that both buildings are to implement with fidelity so that there's not this difference of, well, this program's better than this program, this teacher's better than this teacher, but they all have a common focus. And when you have students that leave that program, you know what they're going to know. These are the things that they've learned because that's the program that we've designed for them. So making sure that you have that in place as you're looking at different program configurations would be really important. When we talk about collaboration, this is a piece that staff is really missing some time to get together and have some professional learning communities within the building, in the level. For example, you have your high cap at Lake Ridge and your high cap at West Mercer. They need an opportunity to get together and collaborate. And I would, at this point, it would probably be some guided collaboration because they're so different that it's going to take some work figuring out what those programs look like as they come together. But also vertically, so that your elementaries are collaborating with your middles, are collaborating with your high schools, so that there's a common understanding of what the students coming up to them are coming with, but also from the high school, what are they expecting students to come with, so that students are successful when they get to the high school. Then another one was to create an advisory group that includes all stakeholders, a representative of all stakeholders. So not only district administration and building administration, teachers, not just highly capable teachers. Well, all of your teachers are highly capable, but your teachers who are teaching highly capable students, as well as your teachers who are teaching the general ed population. And then some parents of both populations so that they both have a voice. it was really interesting to me that your high cap parents were the most vocal about wanting the program for all students, not just the high cap students. And every focus group, they mentioned that. So that was pretty telling to me that your parents are behind making sure that this is an equitable process and students get the best education. So that was pretty exciting, I thought. So the next one we'll talk about is professional, did I miss one? Professional development. This is one I would say to look out for all staff, because not only do you have highly capable students who need differentiation, you have your academically talented students who need some differentiation, as well as your special education and your Title I, your students who are a little bit behind and have some remediation that they might need. So how can teachers learn to differentiate within their classroom for the populations that they have? If you learn to do it for the highly capable, it's really easy to do it, to go ahead and carry those best practices down to all levels. And I don't think it will be that difficult, but your teachers, right now, they don't feel like they have the skills. You've got great teachers, they just need the skills. The other one that I suggested was to work with a consultant who really understands the unique needs of highly capable students. Highly capable students, they have some unique needs if you are familiar with them. Sometimes they're over here and you're over here. How do you bring that brilliance together so that they're being successful? But there's also programs out there for highly capable that a consultant could come in and do on-the-job, job-embedded training with your teachers, so that it's not just I go to a conference and I come back and nobody else knows what I know. And I don't really have a colleague to bounce ideas off of, but they can work on that together and build a really cohesive team. And then the last one was to create opportunities for students to work and interact with a student of all abilities. They want to be with their friends, they want to be with their peers. So, and then differentiation for social and emotional success. The homework, I kept hearing about homework and lots of homework, not just from the students but from the parents, and a lot of busy work. So I would really review the homework requirements for these students and make sure that it's age appropriate. Just because they're highly capable student doesn't mean we double the work. There's some ways to get around that, so they're still learning and they still have homework, but they don't have to stay up all night to get it done. And then create the opportunities for those students to interact with other students. So again, an additional data point to be used, the Renzulli behavioral scale would be really important. One of the things that came up was students' behavior in the highly capable classrooms. Some of the parents and staff felt like students with behavior issues shouldn't be in a highly capable classroom. That's not always the case. Sometimes if we make sure we're meeting their needs, they may not be a behavior problem. So looking at another scale in there with behavior so that you can make sure that you're meeting the needs of those students as well. And then reviewing the program expectations to make sure that they're age appropriate. I know when I was talking with your kids, I thought, these kids are so articulate. Your middle school students, they talk like college students, so I understand where I would go, they can do more, because listen how they're talking, you know. So the last one is the equity and access issue, and we talked a little bit about the disproportionality that we saw in the data. So just really look at that and make sure that all students have the opportunity to be in who should be in. Really look at, are you overqualifying students, the amount of students who are in the program? Is there a way to include more students in a program like that and still have it as meaty as you want it to be? And that was the main things that we came up with for recommendations. So I would entertain questions if you have any.
I guess first comment would be really appreciate this work. Very much appreciate the work being directed by the administration. It's very trusting to throw out a program to some independent consultants and point out the positives and the negatives or the areas of improvement. And I think it's really refreshing. I think it's wonderful that you have the trust in the board to have this, independent assessment of this. There's always areas of improvement, and we've seen that here. And it's important for our district to get that feedback. And so just appreciation for that, the openness of this discussion. And I think it's our responsibility as board members to make sure that we are forward-looking with this data. And we're not looking to blame, that we got what we've got and we're just going forward. And self-reflection is difficult for individuals. It's difficult for organizations. It's very difficult for public entities that are doing this in front of the TV. So appreciate everybody for doing this.
Thank you. Any other questions at this time? Me too.
Of course, I found some key things throughout that were very enlightening to me. Some things that I kind of had assumed in the back of my mind, and to see them brought forward in an assessment like this, I thought was kind of a relief to have it out in the room and talked about, and to see it supported through the quantitative data as well, and to hear through those small groups and the feedback that you're receiving, that it's echoing through a large portion of our community. So some of the things that stood out to me, one is the high number of students that we do have in our district. And I think we're aware of that. And we have a highly competitive district and a lot of people qualifying. Now, I think where some people in our community might start to get nervous when we talk especially about overrepresentation of certain demographics is that they begin to sense that maybe there'll be a cutback or a cap, and I just want to clarify now that that's not what we're talking about in any way whatsoever. Students who qualify are going to get the support that they need, absolutely. But something that did pull out to me is, and I'm making a link that isn't necessarily a link. I'm a storyteller, so I like to connect things. We have that low representation of our students in poverty or our free and reduced lunch students. Very underrepresented in that. And paired with that, we also have a group of students who are self-identifying, or families, that they're doing tutorial work and getting workbooks and practicing for the test to get accepted into the program. And of course, those students who are in that lower economic echelon can't necessarily afford tutors and extra workbooks and the time it takes to really study for that. So I'm wondering if there may be some correlation there between those two aspects as one of the things that's unfortunately leaving those students underserved. I thought it was interesting, I think it was on page 11 in the executive summary, under Standard 5 and challenges, you had used the term a true high cap learner, which I think brings that same issue forward of how many students are there because they truly qualify as that broader thinker that has that grit and that patience and that desire to go deeper into education, and how many are being represented by those who just studied really well for the initial test. Which then leads me to the stress and anxiety. If a student has practiced for the test really well and has gotten into the program, but is now in the program and is faced with this depth of knowledge and breadth of knowledge they're expected to be able to digest and are struggling to keep pace with that, could that be adding to that stress and anxiety as well? So these were some of the things that really stood out for me. Of course, I think most of us are aware of how many students we have enrolled in these programs. And it seems to me that the two programs, how long have we had the two separate programs between Lake Ridge and West Mercer?
It was in my second, going into my third year at Lake Ridge when we started it. So that would be 9, 10, 10, 11, probably 12, 13,
Okay.
or 11,
I
12,
wasn't
somewhere
sure it had
right
been
in
that
there.
much time.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So I wondered if that played into kind of the differences, but it sounds like maybe they've had time to grow their own identities as schools. Yeah, I really appreciate the work that went into this. and opening up the books and your expertise and having to pull these things out. I think our programs are amazing. I think taking what we've learned in those programs and sharing that with the rest of our general education population is a great recommendation. I love that. And that differentiated education for all students is important to me. So whether they pass a test or not, that each student is challenged to just beyond the level of their ability, so that we're always seeing that year of growth and some. So thank you.
Deborah, did you have any comment?
Okay.
I had some.
Okay. Well,
Did you, or was it just to address what Brian was talking about?
no, it was just to bring some things up. But
Okay.
one thing was, I'd like to opine, like, at the appropriate time. But before we do that, I was wondering if the superintendent would like to discuss this, or would you prefer to hear us opine on this first and then throw it to you? Because essentially, I think the recommendations, I assume, are going to come to the administration, and you're going to make your own recommendations. But do you want to talk first, or
Nope.
have us opine first?
I would like to hear
Okay.
from all of the directors.
So I had a question. Thank you for this, and this does validate some of my anecdotal information as well, so I appreciate that, but there's also some other things that came up. In particular, I was concerned about, and probably other people in the group are as well, about the SBA and MSP, actually not the MSP, but the SBA language arts test results that appear for grade 6 and grade 7. So I'm looking at page 18 in the longer document. And it looked like, and some analysis said that on page 16, that there's some areas of struggle for high-cap students, listening and speaking, research and inquiry, and that there's quite a significant number or percentage of students who are not at standard on those claims. And there was a lower than expected advanced result, like a 4 as opposed to a 3 on some of those tests at that time. And I would imagine there's been some analysis, or there will be some analysis about why that might be, so we can try to address it. So I didn't know if at this time is appropriate to hear about any thoughts on that, or if that might be something that comes later.
That is definitely future conversation. This is just the initial presentation. We've certainly, staff members individually, I know Learning Services have had some discussion about the report, but I think Director Jorgensen, when he said how to move forward, is the place where staff will be looking to go next. Certainly there's recommendations, certainly there's a lot of pieces here that we need to digest. And so we've been talking about advisories a bit tonight, but staff will be forming that advisory within the smaller circle and then expanding it out to larger circles as we work through this review, our program, and developing a plan. How to move forward.
Okay, thank you. Deborah?
Thanks. I guess I'm wondering if you had a feeling of how much both parents of high-cap students and parents of non-high-cap students truly understand the program and truly understand what it is that their student needs, and how different actually is it than students who don't qualify for high-cap?
So,
those are really two separate questions.
Right, I got it. So the first question, how much do parents really understand? It depended on a few things. It depended on what age their child was, and it depended on if they had a sibling in the program already. And it depended upon how many activities their child had with students, with parents or students already in the high-cap program. A lot of what the younger students' parents knew came from t-ball games and basketball games, and that's why I called it the bleacher communication. That was the main thing. They said my student qualified for this program. I don't know what it is, and I signed them up, but I don't even know what they're going to be doing, and I don't know where to find the information. So it just depended on the age group and where they learned the information. Some had it right, some didn't have it right, and some knew what their students were doing. Especially in the PEP program, it was a little, we were not really sure what our student does, but they go work with Mrs. Neighbor for a little, newcomer a little bit. So there were some pieces like that, especially with the newer students. As the focus groups were the older age group, those parents pretty much understood. At the elementary level, they really understood the differences between the two programs. They could call it out very, very easily. And then at the middle school, they knew, and their big concern was getting students into AP classes in the high school, and making sure that if their students needed to walk to the high school for a class, that was taken care of. So they did understand that there were some other options for students available within the district. So I think that was the first question. Okay.
So in terms of the second question as to are they different, the two programs, at the elementary level, they're different curriculum. So yes, I would say that there's a pretty big difference between the two. I don't necessarily believe one to be better than the other, per se. I've had conversations with parents who prefer the gen ed curriculum and vice versa, so it kind of depends on perceptual data there. In the middle school, it is a little different, not quite as different. It kind of depends on the content area as to how different it is. And then in the high school, there's really no difference because it's about students self-selecting. So they would select an AP class or an honors class, and then counselors just monitor their progress there.
I guess this question comes from a lot of places in terms of, the elitism. So many of our students do well, whether or not they score in the top 2 or 3% on this test in second grade. And the fact that we know that there's ways that our students learn the best. And I know that this is, I'm eager to hear how the district is going to implement some changes. And I guess I'm just wondering, do you recommend that there be a specific high cap program, especially at the elementary level?
I'm recommending that you look at it. It might be something that you decide you want to do. It might not serve your population. But what was very clear was your students in high cap are a lot like the students in your gen ed classrooms. Typically, if you were to go look up characteristics of a truly highly capable student, you would see some different things than what you probably saw walking into most of your classrooms. Versus an academically talented student who has the grit, who has the perseverance to go with it. Your highly capable student doesn't always have grit because they haven't always had to work hard. Versus some of your gen ed students who do have that grit, who could do as well as your highly capable student in a program. So I'm recommending that you look at what program could you have that could accelerate, differentiate for your highly capable student, and still support your gen ed student who might possibly be working at the same level as your highly capable student, because you don't have a big difference. So. Mm-hmm.
And did you have more? Go ahead.
Done a little bit of research on this. If I misspeak to any of the educational scholars here, please feel free to correct me. This 19% is fascinating. And I think a lot of people have kind of heard it was pretty large. And I think when you go back to the 1920s and 30s, I think the whole idea of the gifted student started then. Louis Terman looked at, I think it's now called the Stanford-Binet test, it's an IQ test, and identified that truly the gifted kids are 2 standard deviations to the right of the median, and that's 2 to 3% of the kids. 2 to 3% of the kids. And I look at the national average and the difference of states, and it goes up to maybe 6% nationally, and various states are around 6%. And now we look at our regional districts that look like they're at 13%. And here on Mercer Island, it's 19%. And that's a big difference. It's 6-fold difference. And as I understand it, these truly gifted kids, it can be a curse. These kids need to be challenged. They need and deserve to have a challenging, unique curriculum. Otherwise, they get bored, lose interest in school, etc. So I have 5 points here, and one is having to do with equity. We're diluting this experience for these truly gifted kids by 6-fold, and I'm not sure if it's really equitable to the truly gifted child. We have the gritty kids, or maybe the gritty parents, that are studying for the test, and I don't think the whole idea gifted is meant to be studying for the test. And it's sad to think that there's second graders that are studying for this, whether it's for their own sake or their interest of their parents, but I question that. I've also heard of students that get in and they're constantly being tutored in order to stay in, and that's really not the idea of the program. Fourth, we've taken away the diversity of the general ed classes, and the people in the general ed class should benefit from the diversity of this high cap too, and so it's not fair to them. And this academic elitism starting at 2nd grade, let me see what appropriate language I can use, I don't know, is totally inappropriate. And I know everybody here knows this. I'm just speaking because we're reviewing this and people in the public are going to be watching. But education is a beautiful thing. And when people try to make it elitist and try to figure out winners and losers, and to even think of telling a kid that they're not a winner at 2nd grade, we're here to individually maximize the potential of all kids. And I know we have this academic elitism at the college level amongst the, quote, highly marketed selective schools that like to send out about 10 invitations more to pump up the statistics. And we can kind of deal with that, but to deal with this with 2nd graders and 3rd graders is really sad. So I appreciate the study and look forward to the recommendations.
Okay. Any other comments? Caroline, did you want to make any observations or questions?
I don't have any specific questions. I moved here in 4th grade and was in an equivalent program in Seattle, the APP program, before I moved. So I moved straight into the high cap program here. And one thing that I've noticed personally is that I, until high school, didn't have classes with anyone other than I think 40 kids from West Mercer that were in the high cap program. So I would personally love to see more joining of high cap kids and non-high cap kids, so that kids can improve their social skills across the whole grade level. So yeah.
Thank you. Okay. Any other wrap-up comments? Okay. Donna?
I would just like to check in with Fred to see if he has, because I know that, as we said, it's now the plan. It's the how do we move forward, building that plan, which is going to be a big part of Learning Services work over this year as we timeline something out over the next couple of years. If I refer you back to the priorities that we discussed over 3 years, we talked about any program adjustments or changes and how that would be staggered out over a couple of years. And I think it even called out highly capable and special ed, because as Fred said, you're going to be hearing that review in a couple of meetings as well. Fred.
I'll follow you. You go ahead.
Go.
So I would like to publicly thank all of our families who participated in the survey, our students who participated, our staff, because, and I think some of them are even here tonight, and they're interested in it, and we're interested in their voices so that we can provide the best opportunity for students. I think we are, even in this discussion tonight, which isn't different than the conversations we have in our schools, I think we continue to conflate the idea of a program versus serving students. And I think you're going to see that next week as well in terms of, are we putting kids in programs or are we serving students in this district? And so just speaking off the cuff there, I think we have to take a hard look at whether or not we're trying to box kids in and put them into what Superintendent Koloski has picked up on very early on in last year and has continued in these silos. And when we put them in those silos, then what are we limiting them? And are we giving them opportunities socially, emotionally, academically? So the feedback was tremendous. It has been incredibly helpful for all of us. Certainly thank you to the center and my colleagues in learning services, as well as the administrators and the teachers who were part of this, because when you saw the focus priorities from our superintendent and that you've been talking about, I think you start to see where this is going to line right into there as well. There's equity, there's access, there's professional learning and professional development, there's the MTSS components of it. And so when we start talking about working smarter and strategically aligning, this is another great opportunity for us to do that, to benefit students at the end of the day. And I think that's important. I have been asked by stakeholders as recently as just this week, hey, I hear that the program's going to completely go in a different direction. There's not even going to be a program. You know, what am I hearing? Is this true? And what I would ask everyone to remember is that this is adaptive work. We don't have the solutions tonight. They're not even in this room. They're in the district somewhere, and it's going to require us looking outside and inside to find the answers. But in 2-3 years from now, do I think it's going to look different? Absolutely. Our students continue to look different, and we've got to meet their needs. So I'm excited about the work. I've got great partners here, and I'm just ready to learn as well. So thank you to everyone who's been involved.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Did you have any? That was it. Okay, our next item, 3B, is Board Policy 1800 OE4, Staff Compensation, the tentative agreements with MIEA for 2018 to 2020.
And just give us a second here to transition. We'll get the documents up on the screen, and Erin's going to make her way to the podium to kind of review the summary with you. And then if you have questions about any of it, Erin and Ty will tag team any of your questions depending on what they're specific to. Erin, when you're ready.
Thank you, Board and public. Essentially, I'm here today to talk about, and glad to say that our district was able to reach tentative agreements with both the certificated and classified units at the MIEA. And the MIA units, overwhelmingly approved those TAs, and now they're here before you. So the high-level summary, we were open just at pretty much with respect to compensation, because we actually had 2-year contracts. They were set to expire since we negotiated last year. I was here last year too. They were set to expire in August 2019, but because of changes in legislature, commonly termed McCleary fix, we had to be open again as to compensation. So with that, there was a negotiation related to compensation, which resulted in some other contractual changes related to additional days and what have you in exchange for that compensation. In addition to that, there was also an addition of a year. So we opened the contract and then we added a year. So we have another 2-year contract. So this contract will expire in 2020, so August 31st, 2020. Sorry, I had to do the math. So the high level is the classified staff, which now includes our custodial group because they recently took a vote and chose to join the classified units, received an overall 16.2% increase in their salary in year 1. So in year 2, they will not be getting an IPD or any other COLA. So it's just going to be a 16.2. We started to call it front loading at the table. So it's just you get it and you're done. So it's just going to roll forward for 2 years. And that was across the board. So it takes one column, one cell, you get 16.2% increase. And the same was for custodians, except there's a slight difference because their schedule had been completely different. It had licenses and what have you. And in looking at, they had a 16.2% increase above one license level. So as if they had one license, because that's sort of where our custodians sat. That was unique to them because it was sort of, it's odd or it's novel, at least in this district, to incorporate a unit in an already existing contract. It just isn't something that we had done in ever, I don't think, but certainly not in my tenure. So that's sort of the high level. On the MIEA certificated, it was a 16% pay increase across the board for all MIE represented certificated staff. Again, this is now a 2-year contract. With that, we actually did have some changes in the length of a certificated staff's working year, their contract year. So we were at 183.5, which is less than some of our surrounding districts, so they work 83.5 days. That's what they had worked. This year it's going up to 185 days, and in the second year, so the 1920 school year, it'll go up to 187 with it's optional. There's 2 optional days for professional learning, which is a mutually agreed upon professional learning. Again, that's achieves the interest of building capacity in our staff members and having them be the lifelong learners we hope our students are going to be. So those are sort of the high-level changes or parts of this agreement. And so attached to this, you'll actually see the TAs. I don't know how to... Are you controlling over there, Ty, or am I doing it? Hold on 1 second. And this is the tentative agreements. And this is what was actually signed, sorry about that, at the table. It's sort of complex when you look at this because it includes our scattergrams and what have you. So these are the schedules that were agreed upon. And then there's also here the tentative agreements that's the schedule, excuse me. The language, the summary page that was here. This is the conceptual. And there were a few other things that were addressed, but those were just some minor language change. And there was also some language change with respect to the Janus decision, because at this point, they're no longer required to pay dues to the union, essentially. And that's a gross summary of the Janus decision, but there are some language that we had to address because our prior contract included language saying they shall contribute to the union or be a religious objector. The final thing is we did put up various schedules that were created by the district. In addition to the 16% increase for certificated, there was also sort of a compression because we're no longer on the state allocated model. We're no longer building off that. So there's a fewer number of columns, and there's also a fewer number of steps. And you'll see that I put it here, or it's been put here for ease of explanation. So we now go step 1 through, I can drive, 1 through 15 and go to 20. Before we were 0 through 16, and then went to 2025. And then now, as I said, so you've compressed this way as well. But so at step 1, you're at 0 years of service. So there's fewer numbers of steps, so you get money sort of earlier. And that's sort of the concept. So our BA, so our very least experienced certificated person will be, if they do the enrichment and the base, it'll be $56,497, where most experienced will be earning $113,037 in a contract year, or up to, if they take advantage of the optional professional learning days. Do you have any questions?
Is that what the enrichment means? they go up to the they go
Yeah.
up higher?
They include that, correct.
So I had a question about the, maybe a clarification. So is the 16% raise and the numbers that we're seeing on this document for 185 days or 187 days?
So
And when
this
you say-
particular document here, we only built 1 year just to sort of give an exemplar. If we go back to the tentative, if you see here on this, and it's just really tiny, I apologize, I might be able, there you go. You'll see that there's actually 2 years, so there's 1890, 1819, and though the base will be, remain the same, your potential is to, I think, earn more in year 2. I can defer to Ty, but I'm pretty sure you earn more in year 2 because you have the potential to work 2 extra days. So your ability to earn, your total earning capacity is larger in year 2 of this contract, which is 1920, because you work 2 more days.
Okay.
But that's at your option.
Okay.
So the schedule for 1920 will have a higher number on the right side. Everything will be increased by 2 days as potential, but it's not concrete.
So, Director Battersby was pretty much spot on. 1819, it is a 14.2% increase. Those 2 additional days that they can work bring it up to the 16%. The 14.2 gets us 185 days in both years. When we get up to the 16%, it's 187 that they can work in total.
Great, thank you.
So just an appreciation for the administration and negotiation team, as well as the teachers unions and administration team, and just the ability for you to come to an agreement. And I know it was a lot of work, so thank you very much for that. One comment, if I interpret it correct, as we front-loaded essentially the raises the first year, there's nothing on the second year. However, my interpretation of the schedule is you're 1 more year senior, and you are essentially paid whatever that incremental 1 to 2 to 3% increase is. So that shouldn't be lost on anybody there. That it's not a 0. You're going for another year, and you're going up that salary schedule.
That's correct.
And you can also move across the columns as you gain more education as well. Step and column are always something that we have to anticipate and build into our budget as well, because it's just inherent in our salary schedule.
Deborah and Brian, did you have any comments or questions?
Just an appreciation for everyone involved. For the long hours and the dedication it took to reach the agreement and to make sure that we open school on time. And also kind of an acknowledgement that the McCleary fix is kind of a once-in-a-lifetime big bump and change, and I don't anticipate anything like this happening, at least not in the next 4 years while I'm sitting at this dais. So, yeah.
I also want to say thank you to everyone who put in tremendously long hours. Knowing that this was a frustrating process, I've mentioned this to some people, and I'll just say it publicly. I'm not a fan of these negotiations and how they go down in terms of the frustration for everyone, including the community, the lack of information, the closed bargaining sessions. I'm not suggesting open. I don't think that's good for anyone either. So, I mean, it's hard to know, but I would love to start exploring a way that we can have all of our needs met that without the negative parts of this process. When talking about money, it's always sticky. There's no question about it. But I know, I mean, I don't want to speak for anyone else, but I don't think I'm the only one to say that we value our teachers, all of our staff tremendously. We want them to be highly valued and as highly paid as possible, while we put students first and make sure that we're fiscally sustainable. I think that there's better ways to do this. than the back and forth that we do. I'm not pointing any fingers. It's the way it's been, and it's the way most negotiations are, but I think we're better than that. And since we all have the same goals and we're such a small community, I think I would love to see what we can do.
Thank you. Caroline, did you have anything to add? Okay. Donna? Okay. Thank you very much, everybody who was involved. We greatly appreciate that we started school on time and that we don't have to do this again for 2 years. Thank you.
Thank you.
We need to vote on it.
Take action now. Well, I'd appreciate it if you take action.
Almost got away with that. Okay, so we need a motion to ratify the salary schedules and tentative agreements between MISD and MIEA for represented certificated and classified employees for the 2018 to 2020 timeframe.
I move that we ratify the salary schedules and tentative agreements between MISD and MIEA for the represented certified and classified employees for 2018 to 2020.
I second.
Okay, any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes 4-0. Thank you. Okay, next up is item 3C, Board Policy 4020, Mutual Respect and Civility Expectations. And this is a second reading, and it is not expected to be the last.
Absolutely not. In the discussion at our last meeting, we talked about how to make this serve our needs, and we took an initial look at it last time, and so this is a second look, and we are here now to review and take suggestions and additions and deletions and bring back a third time or a fourth time if as needed, as the will of the board. So you can see, I don't think we need to go through the whole explanation again unless there's anyone who has any questions about the why. But here's our Erin's. I give Erin credit for this. We've had several of us read it and weigh in as well, and I hope that you've had the opportunity to take a look, and we'll weigh in also to let us know if this represents a policy that can really say what we need, what we want to say of how we want our community to be represented.
Okay, you ready?
Yep. So again, essentially, I gave sort of the purpose before, but I try to take on board, or we try to take on board what your direction from the last meeting, and really draft a policy that was more in line with the shared commitments of respect and mutual responsibility. I may have said it incorrectly. And the work that was done by a group of 60-plus stakeholders back in the early 2000s to create those, but really to honor that and convert it into a policy, because that is what we look to when we're talking about how we interact and how we operate as a district. So I tried to go back and really capture all the stakeholders. So one change you'll see is the addition of the board members to this. A second thing you'll see is there's an omission of specifically all the don't do this, and more of this is what we expect. And so the negative is assumed. I took on board President Drinkwater's, at least I tried to, position that shorter is better. And I think there's at least from my perspective, I think others' perspective, there's a desire to have some sort of like, if there isn't respect and civility, what do you do? But take that out of the policy piece and put it into procedure, which is more akin to what we do with other issues and other topics, where here's the overarching guidelines and this is what you're going to do if it doesn't work out. So you actually see two things here. So it's now been broken apart into here's your policy and here's a process to address it. So it's sort of a policy and procedure, which is very similar to our other models. And I highlighted, though it was addressed in the initial draft, I made it more pronounced that differences of opinion aren't to be automatically perceived as uncivil or disrespectful, as long as they're presented in an appropriate way that's not disruptive, and that we actually encourage that. and that's how we learn from each other. And we anticipate in any educational environment, or frankly any environment, that there'll be some discourse where not everybody's on the same page. So I did try to address that. Additionally, included in this iteration of the draft of the policy are cross-references to other policies, because I think it was Brian who mentioned that there's smatterings of this in many of our policies, and sort of to bring it all together. So do provide cross-references, so if someone does feel like there's a violation of respect and civility, they go there and they look down at the cross-references, say, oh, actually I think this might be sexual harassment or some other type of conduct, and leads them to the correct source, because what's disrespectful might also constitute something else. And may trigger other things. So that's, and there's also cross-references to some legal references, and again, those are changed and updated as there's policies that are implicated or laws change, so we can add those as we find them or believe that they're relevant. And I just tried to capture the one that I could readily think of and locate, but there may be others. So those are the things that I tried to do. I don't know how well I did them, and I would appreciate your feedback.
Thank you very much for doing this. Board members have comments?
I really appreciate the reworking of the initial. I think it really captured the spirit and the intent and what we aspire to be in the way we interact with each other throughout the district and the community. So I appreciate the work on that, and I really like it.
Deborah?
I agree, especially in reviewing both together. I like the positive. And yeah, this looks good. I mean, I think it addresses the things it needs to address without removing our ability for different viewpoints.
Ralph?
Echo, thank you for your work. Couple comments. One is I was wondering if we should include RCW 28A 635010, which is in that same set of ones that you referenced, but it's entitled Abusing or Insulting Teachers, Liability for Penalty. And I thought if anything should be included, maybe that one should be, but I was wondering if there's a reason why it wasn't included.
That's an oversight, and I agree it should be included.
Okay. In the second paragraph, it refers to the work done a decade ago. I think it would be wonderful if we could have a reference or a citation to that, just to acknowledge the people's work and the date, so that A, it's acknowledging their work, and B, if there was some reference to it, people could look into it. Brian gave us a wonderful background last time about that, so if that's possible. Thirdly, sorry, that second paragraph I'm thinking could be misinterpreted, and I'm hoping that maybe, or thinking maybe some wordsmithing would be appropriate. It starts out with modeled after mutual respect and shared responsibilities identified by our district stakeholders over a decade ago. And then later on it spells out various stakeholders. I think it's important that we don't overreach in this. That work that was done in 2004, 2008 was really, I think, the board, the PTA, MIEA, perhaps students, I don't know, but I don't think it was a public, and I don't think it was parents per se, because parents and PTA are different. And I would assume all 7,000 parents didn't necessarily agree with this. So I don't want to misinterpret. So my suggestion would be to change our district stakeholders to certain district stakeholders, and then perhaps put an EG and include the ones that were involved. Because essentially what we're doing is we're taking that mutual shared respect responsibilities that was done by that group, and we're now trying to spread it across the public, the parents, and that's a big change. And otherwise, I think it's not really completely clear. So that's what I'd recommend. The other thing would be, sorry. I'm coming there. Just a second. Where in paragraph 2 is uncivil reference? Oh, it's paragraph 1. Again, I'm kind of going towards this aspirational, and maybe I'm going to the nth degree. I'm just wondering if that last sentence in talking about uncivil conduct is necessary. Maybe we just keep it as civil conduct and talk about that. Not totally vested with that. The idea would be to delete that last sentence in paragraph 1. And perhaps I'm ending up there because I kind of think of, when I read the definition of uncivil conduct, I wonder if it kind of conflicts with civil disobedience, which has been a big tool in our society to correct a lot of wrongs in society and organizations and institutional biases. And I would hate to, if the students wanted to walk out and do a protest on gun violence, I would hate for them to kind of be hammered with this policy, perhaps. So I don't know what the right answer is there, but I do want to just throw it out there.
I appreciate that. Thank you for adding that RCW. I think that was a really good point. And I agree that second paragraph could use some wordsmithing, but I think that last sentence of the first paragraph is really necessary, because especially how it ends with the whole point of this is that we don't want it to interfere with any student's ability to learn, or for the districts to educate our students and do our primary mission. So I think that's really important to point out, and then the uncivil conduct is defined below. If we take uncivil conduct out, then we still need to address this differentiation, which I really appreciate you included, between what is uncivil conduct, being discourteous and disrespectful manner, as opposed to the expression of controversial or differing viewpoints, which I think in your example, which is a good one, I think would fall under the protesting is a form of expressing your viewpoint, and it's not necessarily uncivil conduct. Those are mutually exclusive, or they might overlap at times, but they're different. And so I don't think it would be problematic. That's my opinion at this point. As far as referencing the mutual respect and shared responsibilities that we have documented on our website, I think that's a great idea to reference that and to more specifically talk about it in a way that could be a little bit different than what's here right now. But again, I don't want it to go too long. So the brevity is better, but I think showing a specific reference to that so that people could do further research on their own if they wanted to. That would be helpful. So that's my comment. Thank you.
In response to Ralph's comment about, number 2 of the uncivil conduct, I could see how that could cause some problems, because we were all supportive of our students' expression this year, just for example, because it was probably the most recent, regarding gun violence, but it did disrupt the educational process as most of our students walked out of class. I don't think that's a bad thing. I mean, but, for example, what if there was a group of students that wanted to make a point that they wanted our teachers to be armed, and maybe we didn't disagree with that. Or I'm sorry, yeah, maybe we didn't agree with their position. So the way that this is worded, I think protests are important, and time, place, and manner restrictions are important, but that sentence might be overbroad for what we're trying to achieve. We all supported it because I think that we all agreed with the position, and I'm just concerned if we don't agree with the position, are we going to have the same, are we going to reach the same conclusion?
Can I make a suggestion? That really addressing student walkouts or protests or exhibitions of free speech is really not, or any stakeholders' free speech is not what this is trying to address. It is trying to address and articulate to anybody who comes to our district that we have an expectation that people behave respectfully to one another. And that's all people. Students, board members, the delivery guy, everybody, whoever you are, if you're at our events, just behave courteously. So, I mean, from my perspective, I was trying to cabinet it in, but uncivil conduct we could just say does not include expression of controversial or differing viewpoints that may be offensive to some people, and just end there. I don't know that there's necessarily, we don't need to say that it's presented in a respectful manner, because up above it says be respectful. So I think that that's probably just not necessary. That would be my off-the-cuff suggestion on editing my work, which this is what I want. So I do really appreciate the feedback, because there's different, I don't think the ask from the people who have interest in this, in the schools and what have you, it has nothing to do with the gun violence. That's not the issue, and that's not what we're trying to achieve. We actually want engaged students who are passionate about citizenship and being active members. I mean, it starts at the top. The development of youth as thoughtful, local and global community participants.
Sure. Yeah, thank you. And I think my expectation is not that we solve the words right now, just that we share these words, and Aaron, it gives you time to think about it for the next go-round. And I think it's appropriate to have a next go-round, because I think this was just uploaded Tuesday, and it would be nice if the public had more opportunity to view it. If I can point out 2 things I left off. One was going to the source of the concern with the confronted with the problem. I'm just thinking of a parent that may feel uncomfortable going to the teacher based on the feedback that the student provided, and them just wanting to go directly to the principal. I recognize that's not optimal and ideal, and I when I meet with people, I say go to the source, but I also respect that there's certain instances where certain people don't feel comfortable doing that. So I'm just wondering what happens in that situation. And again, I don't want to have a policy that is kind of used to stifle input from the public or parents. So that's one. The other one was 4th bullet down, honor and value diverse opinions and perspectives. Honor, I think there's multiple definitions of, and I'm just thinking maybe respect and value diverse opinions and perspectives. If I hear an opinion, I'm not sure if I'm going to... the definition of honor meaning, yes, I'm going to hear it out. Honor also means highly, what would that be?
No, I understand.
Yeah.
I think that's actually maybe adopted from the original
Okay.
text. So I'm happy to look at the text, but I do appreciate what you're saying.
Thank you for honoring Ralph's request.
Any other comments before
I just wanted to say I appreciate how respectful we're all being in any slight disagreements we may have within the document. They were able to discuss it politely and with mutual respect. So thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, I'll bring it a re-edited version. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Erin.
We'll also continue when we bring this forward to tag each edition so you can look back and see the changes as all the iterations. It's a great learning experience for all of us and wonderful modeling for our students.
Okay, next item, 3D, Board Policy 1005, Board Officers, Legislative Priorities for the WASDA Legislative Assembly. And do you have
Before
any
we move
comments?
forward, can I request a quick break?
A quick break?
Yeah.
Yes, we will take a 5-minute break
Thank you.
before we get started. So we'll reconvene at 7:52. Okay, we'll get started back with our meeting, and we're on item 3D. There's a lot of dimension to this one. Legislative priorities for WASDA Legislative Assembly. So, Brian, would you like to lead this one?
Thank you very much. Yes, so there's a lot happening here. 121 different potential positions to prioritize for us. We've been asked to select our top 15 priorities and have some backups in case one of our selected priorities doesn't pass through in Legislative Assembly or is modified out of what we said was going to be a priority. So it's going to have some backups. I'm not sure if anyone has a preference. The list you have up right now is actually a great list to go through just by title. I hope everyone's had a chance to go through the 200-page handbook that this came with. As we go through this particular list, as we get into page 2 and 3, there are a series of highlighted position statements, starting at like 49. Those highlighted positions are positions that may be modified within the Assembly. Some of our legislative priorities and standing legislative priorities are being combined from 6 into 1 and condensed, which was a part of the handbook. That part 1 of the handbook covered in the regular positions calendar some of the summaries and how things were going to be combined together. Yeah, so I'm not sure how you would like to go about selecting priorities. I prepared a list of 15 priorities plus 5 alternates. I shared those with the superintendent that I think seem to speak to what I've seen with our legislative priorities in the past and some of the issues not only with our district, but also some of the issues going across Washington State. I'm happy to share those at any point. And I brought with me last year's priorities as a refresher. So last year, this led to 3 major themes for when we went into our legislative convention, which is shared with WASBO, which is the Washington Association of Business Officers, and WASA, which is the Washington Association of School Administrators, and WASDA, the School Directors Association. We all get together. We spend a day together in a major conference. We speak, we hear from the governor, from the OSPI, and all of our group's leaders, and then we head off to the Capitol to talk with our representatives about our issues. So last year, the 3 main themes were 1, McCleary funding plan. Covered under that was special education, salary allocations and state schedule, levies and local effort assistant, regionalization, and hold harmless. The second theme was school facilities, which specifically spoke to creating new grant programs to modernize schools in districts under 1,000 students, authorizing a constitutional amendment to be forwarded to the citizens following school district bonds to adopt with 55% passage rather than the current 60, and then phasing in improvements in 2 main variables in the SCAP formula over 6 years. And then the last main theme from last year was high school graduation, and the overarching was delinking graduation requirements from assessments, I believe it was. So that'll jog your memory as to what ended up being our top priorities last year. All right.
So is there interest in taking turns talking about what our individuals' thoughts on what our priorities should be? Or do we want to have Brian go through his list and then just comment? Do either of you have a preference?
Do we have a visual of his list? Like a handout?
I did not create a handout.
But we could go through the one that's on the screen right now, and you could address them in order so that we can follow along in our documents.
Yeah.
Do you have a preference either way, Deborah?
I know how much work Brian's put into this, so I'm very interested in hearing what he has.
Okay, I think that'd be great. You're good with that? Okay.
I just want to be sure I wasn't leading anyone into this, that everybody had a chance to have their the
Don't
voices
worry,
heard.
we'll be able to make comments. We
Okay.
appreciate you leading it.
And I'm going to flip to, you can look through this, and then I'm going to actually flip into the book here, the handbook for broader descriptions. And these are in no particular order. In fact, they're just in order as you would find them throughout the handbook. The first one that came up for me was listed on page 6 of the handbook. It's a legislative position, point 1, point B, point 40, found on page 22 and 23 of the handbook. And this deals with K-8 world language instruction. And it says WASDA shall initiate or support legislation that promotes and funds innovative models and or opportunities for world language instruction in kindergarten through 8th grade.
And thank you for highlighting it on the screen there for us, too.
Oh, cool. That spoke to me because we're currently working with our own world language program here. We're not fully at K-8 yet, but we're headed in that direction. And for this to have specific language in it that speaks to funding that promotes and funds innovative world language programs, I thought would be important for our district to ensure that we're being supported in that. Yeah. My next highlight was on page 7. Oh, no, it's position 7, page 23 to 25. And this is one of the ones where they've taken 6 legislative positions and they've formed them into one new legislative position. It's going to be levy rollbacks and hold harmless, SLP 7.4.B.1. No, I'm sorry. 7.4.B.1. Let me find it. So the final clean document for that would read, WASDA shall initiate and or support legislation which would ensure districts are held harmless to ensure that funding of school district operations and programs obligations necessary to deliver the programs of basic education is maintained or enhanced during 1, state budget cuts, or 2, state transitions from levy to state funding. So I think from what we've just experienced through bargaining across the state and are continuing to see, we are still not clearly out of McCleary, and certain districts are still struggling with that hold harmless clause. So to me, this stood out. This was a priority last year. It's a recurring priority, and so for me, it felt like this still belongs to be in that top 15. My next one was position number 12 on page 29 to 35. It's attract and retain high-quality staff. This is a big part of our conversations happening across the state and across the United States right now. And so the new, let's see, again, they're combining several into one. So I'm trying to find the clean version of that. It's
Page 29 in the large document.
Yeah, I'm showing the clean version actually over on page 31. No, then 32.
30.
31.
Oh, there.
Yeah, proposed refined title and consolidated position. And this is a big one. Attract, recruit, and retain high-quality, diverse staff. The consolidated position, WASDA, shall initiate or support legislation that initiates and promotes innovation and intentional strategies to prepare, recruit, and retain individuals from diverse backgrounds, including people of color, that better reflect the student populations that are served, and encourages equity across the state, and removes barriers that further staffing shortages, including efforts to enhance the ability of hard-to-staff small or property-poor districts, promote state-to-state reciprocal agreements, and eliminate additional testing for recent out-of-state graduates. I'm just reading the first few segments of these bullets. Create state-level incentives for teachers and support staff to consider hard-to-staff schools. Hire individuals who have graduated from qualified international or out-of-state college university teacher preparation programs. Change PESB rules to allow for emergency certification of qualified candidates. Maintain or increase funding for alternative routes to teacher certification. So it took several and combined them all into one. And I think it addresses our teacher shortage. It creates new paths for teachers, including paths for paraprofessionals and support staff to work towards getting that credential and becoming teachers. And there's a beautiful equity piece that's in here as well that speaks to diversity in students and staff. So I recommend that one. My next recommendation is position number 14. This is a standing legislative position, so you find it at position number 14 or 54, depending on where you're looking. And that's on page 34 to 36. No, 33 to 34. It's early childhood education. And the clean consolidated position would read early childhood education, kindergarten preparedness. WASA shall initiate and or support legislation which would provide funding for public early childhood education, including kindergarten preparedness and assistant programs, especially for children in poverty or for whom English is not their primary language. I think this is important for us as we have a growing program here that's happening with early childhood education. And I think preparedness is a big issue across the state as well. So I recommend that one. My next recommendation is number 15, position number 15 or 51. This is another standing legislative position, 7.1.B12, funding educational support services for students. And let's see, that's another large clean version, but WASA shall initiate or support legislation and ample funding for social emotional learning and behavioral support services for P12 based on individual student needs and aligned with the national model standards and recommendations. The state will help every school build capacity for wraparound services by enhancing the prototypical school funding formula for support service staffing, including but not limited to school nurses, social workers, counselors, psychologists. Districts will have the flexibility to increase support personnel through local funding and grants. So I think when we speak to where we are as Mercer Island School District with enhancements and enrichments, I think this speaks to us through counselors and nurses in our district, as well as the need for these educational support services for our students. Levy authority and local area assistance. It's number 16 is the position number. We can find it on page 36 to 38. And this has not been assigned a legislative position yet, but it is a consolidation. So let's see, 638, find the clean version. There was one thing I wasn't sure of in the argument for. I reached out to the legislative committee to get an answer or a correction on the argument for. In it states the new maximum levy rate of $1.50 per thousand assessed value or $2,500 per student, whichever is more. And as much as I would love that to be the case, I don't think that that's accurate. So this one, again, because it's been combined, speaks specifically to that local levy authority, maintain the ability of school districts to access local voter-approved levy funding, revising how levy authority is calculated based on the designated percentage of each school district's budget, and reinstating and fully funding LEA as originally conceived in 1989. 50% levy equalization is a floor for equalizing funding, with a goal of equalizing 100% of the total amount levied. If the current policy, EHB 2242, is maintained, levy and LEA policy needs to be adjusted by raising the amount of maximum levy funding available to districts from $1.50 to $2, or $2,500 per student, whichever is greater. So they're actually, this is the language is actually requesting to move in that direction. Increase the per pupil guarantee for LEA to an amount that would assure greater equity across districts, and align growth factors used to calculate levy and LEA annually to assure greater stability and reliability. So I think that ties in with the McCleary fix and everything that's happening there and the continued work. The next two, oh, yeah.
May I interrupt?
Yes.
I'm looking for a nod from our CFO. Is that a good thing?
It would be a good thing.
Okay.
That one leapt out of the pages at me. So the next two we all should be familiar with. Positions number 17 and 22. 17 is Comprehensive School Safety, submitted by Issaquah, Bellevue, and Mercer Island and Snoqualmie Valley School Districts. So this is what we worked on with the small group that was convened by the Legislative Committee. And it's the exact language that we approved as a board, as signatories onto that. So I can go deeper into that if you'd like, but I think it'd probably be a pretty good idea if we supported that as a priority. And then the next one is position number 22, which is on page 42, and it's gun violence prevention. This is another one that we, again, joined onto with Issaquah. So, and we've discussed that previously, so I don't think we need to go into that. But I'm very excited to see Mercer Island's name in the workbook. Nice job, everyone. Number 31. I'm getting there. So position number 31, on page 48 to 49. And the title is Trauma-Informed Practices and Supports for Students. The position statement is WASDA shall initiate and or support legislation for funding and implementation of school-based trauma-informed practices and supports to assist students who suffer from a variety of trauma within their lives. This, for me, goes hand in hand with social and emotional learning. It ties in with what we've been talking about with mental health supports within our district, and trauma-informed practices are certainly a pretty significant topic that's being discussed. When I think of that, I also think of other groups like restorative justice and all this work that we're doing within the school culture and helping our students in that differentiated level. So this one really spoke out to me. My next recommendation is part 33, our position number 33. And that's on page 51. This is a previous legislative position, 1C32, and its title is Expanding Access to and Equitable Funding for All Dual Credit Options. And let's see, they didn't change it. So WASDA shall initiate or support legislation that provides a stable and equitable funding system for all Washington's dual credit options. Every student who chooses to take a dual credit option should have all the costs, tuition, books, fees, and transportation paid for, as in the case for students who choose to take the classes solely through their public high school. The dual credit funding should apply the dual credit funding should apply but not be limited to classes taken through the AP/IB Cambridge systems, Running Start, Tech Prep, college and the high school, online college coursework, and participating classes at our state's skill centers. So as we talk about being college and career ready and providing those opportunities for all students regardless of their economic status, this really spoke to me. Next is position number 39, Academic Rigor and Equity in Public Education. This is another legislative position, LP 1.B.33. WASDA shall initiate or support legislation and funding for innovative and equitable solutions, including but not limited to work-based learning, equivalency course of study, and competency-based crediting to enable students across the state to obtain the 24-credit graduation requirement and be prepared for college and career. The essential component is to provide additional opportunities to access rigorous coursework, including rigorous transition classes during the senior year. This should be available to all students in Washington. So again, speaking to that college and career readiness, I thought was important, and especially as we're shifting toward that 24 credit for us. We offer that 7-period day at the high school, which makes it a bit easier for our students to accomplish the school. For other students across the state who don't have that flexibility, it's more challenging. So this is kind of going beyond our island a bit. Position number 40 is my next one, and that's on page 56, 55 and 56. It is a legislative position existing already. English language learners is the title of that. This one's a little bit long, but WASDA shall initiate or support legislation that ensures English language learners, students, have equal access to quality public schools and instruction. This includes, but is not limited to, creating a grant program for school districts to implement dual language programs for ELL and native English-speaking students, supporting school districts with certificated staff working in classrooms with EL students, and add their highly qualified status by completing a certificated ELL or bilingual endorsement, including language acquisition, coursework, and multicultural competency training as part of the core requirements of teacher education programs, and developing academic language interim assessment tools to measure growth toward mastery of English language development standards, in addition to the state's annual measure of progress in academic English language learning. So again, I'm thinking about our ELL students, and we have it was last meeting or the meeting before that, we had the presentation with the numbers of English language learners that we have in our district, and the extraordinary number of languages that are spoken within our district, that this goes to support that, not only here, but across the state. So it seemed important to me. Next is number 45. Now we're getting into when I spoke with Superintendent Klosky earlier in the week, I was very proud that I had gone through and found my priorities, and then I discovered that beginning on page 59 were all of the standing legislative platforms that I did not look at. So this goes into that. So these are returning. These have been with WASDA for more than 4 years, and so now are considered just a part of the standing platforms that we advocate for. So this is 59, special education and special needs students. Number 45, WASDA shall initiate and or support legislation which requires full funding for special education programs and services. Such programs and services should maximize assistance to children rather than to their various categorizations and assessments. Any state funding formula shall recognize the costs will vary according to the needs of every child and therefore every district based upon IEP of each student. Provide adequate funding for all of the required services for eligible special education students without imposing an artificial cap. Exclude students for whom districts do not receive an annual basic education allocation from any special education program enrollment funding caps, and recognize that any funding formula based upon the assumption that every district is the same budget percentages costs for special education is inherently flawed and will not work. So this speaks to that differentiated education required for all students, and I think what you were talking about earlier with siloed groups, that this is bringing supports to every student. We're getting towards the end. 46 was my next priority suggestion. Enhanced funding for transitional bilingual education. Number 46, page 59, it's an SLP. Enhanced funding for transitional bilingual education. WASDA shall initiate or support the recommendations of the Quality Education Council, QEC, for funding and instructional hour increases for the transitional bilingual instruction programs as outlined below. Continue to increase hours of English language acquisition instruction for students in English proficiency levels 1 through 3, as measured by the annual state-based English proficiency exam, and to provide 6 to 8 instructional hours per week for grades 6 through 12. Provide 2 years of 3 additional hours of English language instruction for exited students, level 4 students in all grades, and increase funding to support this as outlined by the QEC. I think, Superintendent Klosky, I had asked you to kind of take a look at crossover between the enhanced funding for transitional bilingual education and number 40, English language learners, to see how they kind of compare and wrap around each other. for you, do they still seem to stand alone, or?
They certainly have components that both are seeking the same ultimate goal of serving English language learners,
Right.
With appropriate funding.
Right. So in this context, maybe we support one or the other. Whether we support both is, yeah. And then my last recommendation for my top 15 was number 89. Which is over on page 65 of the handbook. And it is tax reform, standing legislative position 7.4.A.21. And it reads, WASDA shall initiate and or support legislation to implement a comprehensive, attainable, stable, and sustainable funding plan for education in Washington State. WASDA shall support legislation to restructure the Washington State tax system to enhance state revenue by establishing stable, broad-based, flexible revenue sources for the state of Washington that are equitable and adequate in order to ensure better educational funding, as well as to maintain funding for other essential state services. So this is a big discussion as we're coming out of McCleary Fix. We realize that relying solely on property taxes is regressive, and it's in the interest of everyone to find a more progressive way of gaining revenue for education and other social services, because the value of your property does not necessarily equate to income or what you're able to pay in taxes. So when I think of this, I think of ample funding and that provision within our state constitution, but I also think of our seniors and low-income families who are struggling to maintain their homes and stay in their homes that they've invested in because property taxes are just getting too great. I think we're feeling that here. I think people are feeling it across the state. So for me, it was important that this was included in that top 15. So there's my top 15.
Thank you very much. How would you two like to proceed? Do you want to go individually? Citing yours, Deborah, you want to go next? Or what you agree with Brian and what you would...
I didn't make a
wanna
list. I mostly agree. I had the same question, and I actually don't remember you bringing this up on Tuesday, unless you brought it up at a different time, about the English language learners and the funding for bilingual education. I agree that it's important. I just don't know that we need to make both a priority. A question about the early childhood education and whether or not that's a priority. I think that, and I just don't have the knowledge. I know that it's obviously a priority here. I know that Seattle fully funds their kindergarten programs as well. So I just don't have the knowledge to know whether or not that needs to be a priority. I mean, it is one. I just don't know whether or not. I don't know how important it is to be on this list.
I'm sorry, which one are you talking about now?
Number 14, early childhood education. One, and I'm looking for it to see the language. One thing that I think is missing from this list is career and technical education funding. And I mean, I think that goes along with our priorities in making sure that we have opportunities for all students and helping them find their passion. So that's something I would like to see in there. I'm looking at, it's on page 59, number 47, career and technical education funding. WASDA shall initiate and or support legislative action that will amply fund career and technical education for 7th through 12th grade, including appropriate staff, equipment, and minor facility remodeling. I think that's in line with our priorities. Just to point out a couple, obviously the school safety and gun violence prevention, as we were co-sponsors. I think the tax reform should be number one. When Brian made the comment earlier how he hopes that we don't go through another major funding issue in the next couple of years, I actually hope we do, because I hope that our legislature does take on and complete a tax reform legislation, as we have the most regressive tax structure in the country. And if we modified it to income-based tax structure, that would be able to fully fund what we all agree is basic education. So I think that's number one, personally, because I think that solves so many of the other issues. The other one that I would just like to point out is the trauma-informed practices and supports for students. The more we learn about brain development and how and learning how trauma impacts brain development, we know that there's physiological changes in children's brains even as early as 3 months old when they're impacted by trauma. It keeps them from learning. So I think that benefits our communities, all of our communities as a whole, and it benefits each student. There's very few students that don't have some impact or don't have trauma, and we all need to know how to best support our students through that trauma so that it doesn't have a major impact on their education. Otherwise, thank you, Brian. I know it was hours and hours and hours of work, and really appreciate your guidance and leadership in this.
Thank you, Deborah. Ralph?
Yeah, just to echo Deborah's thank yous to Brian. Appreciate all the work you've done. And how familiar you are with all these. So thank you. I also would like to echo that stable platform or stable finance. I forget what that last one I think is very important. Also the trauma informed. But I would also like to mention something I think we're overlooking that is very important to this district. Right now, this district has 3.5 schools that are 60 years old or older. It's half of our buildings. And they're going to need to be replaced at some point. We're doing a facility analysis, I think, at our next meeting, and we're going to find out more about it. I think the elementary schools, when the remodels were done, I think the remodels were promised for 20 years, and we're coming up to 20 years on them. So given that, given also the reduction in class size, I think this is an important thing to many other districts across the state that they don't have facilities. And you combine that with the tax fatigue, given the regressive taxation on property taxes. I think there's 2 items here that address the state increasing the amount of funds for schools, as well as increasing the match from us being maybe a 1% match to a 20% match of state funds, as well as that other item that talked about us maybe not having to pay sales tax when we build a school building. So it reduces the cost maybe by 10%. So
I think it's actually putting the sales tax into a fund which would then be given back. But
same thing.
It's net.
Yeah. So I think it would behoove us to think about moving 1 or 2 of those things into that top 15. And maybe there's room with the redundancy at the ELL and the bilingual, maybe 1. And then I also noted, I think on 39, you mentioned it was kind of beyond the island. It was the, and so maybe if you're looking for 1 to take out, if we can only do 15. Can we only do 15?
We get 15, but
Okay.
some may be kicked out.
Okay, gotcha.
If I can just offer just a quick idea about the ELL versus TBIP. For our particular purposes, the ELL one really talks about some interim assessments. I'm not sure that we need more data on our students on how they're doing. We need more funding so that we can work with the students. So I would suggest, and defer to you, Superintendent Kolosky, but the TBIP is more important than the ELL piece personally, just because of the funding that's tied to that and being able to serve students and provide them with the services they need, not the assessments for it. So
that would be number 46 as opposed to 40.
Yes,
Okay,
if you
thank
were
you.
having to choose
That's
between
helpful.
those.
Okay. So thank you, Ralph, for bringing up the school construction ones, because those were on my list as well, and I think you and I were on that same page last year at the Legislative Assembly. So I would also like to see that number 83 and number 34 on our list.
They were in my alternates.
Okay, great. And so based on the feedback we've got from Assistant Superintendent Rundle, maybe we can eliminate number 40 from our top list. Not that it's not important. And for the most part, I had only picked out 10 or 11, but so many of them were, number 27 is also a school construction revenue one. So we may want to look at what we think is the most important of those three then. I forgot there was another one. Yeah, it's similar to, there's a lot of similarities there. But anyway, that number 27 was another one about school construction. And I agree with the trauma one as well, and so many of these, and that so many of them address funding. I agree it should raise the tax reform one to a very high priority, so that we can address these things. A couple other ones. I had a funding education support services for students, number 51 highlighted. Number 69, diversity training for teachers. But the funding of things, I think the big things like schools and special ed, which is a big part of it, is the highest priority for me. So, are you tallying, Brian, how many we have right now that we've got as potential priorities?
I think there have only been 3 added above what I, or 4? No, 5.
2,
which all makes sense to me.
4, yeah, I've got 4 too, okay. And then ones that have been mentioned a few times could maybe float higher to the top. And ones that have been endorsed by our staff, like the levy authority and local effort assistance.
Yeah, so I had...
And then Superintendent Kolosky, do you have anything to add comment-wise on any of these?
No, I think you've addressed the ones that staff feels are pertinent for us. The funding continues to be a consideration, and I was glad to see the construction pulled out as well. The levy authority one, if that's the way it's written, we were all kind of saying that would be extremely helpful for us. So those are some of the future fixes, hopefully.
So I'm seeing everyone is kind of in agreement on the tax reform, which was number 89. Trauma-informed practices was up there.
And I don't think we really mentioned, but social emotional learning, I think we talk about so much. I think we all feel that. Would that be fair to say that we all feel that's a very high priority?
Mm-hmm.
And I would think, when is this event?
The 21st and 22nd.
So we don't meet again.
Right.
But you've heard everything that we've said. So, I feel that with your knowledge and this feedback, you can make that list, and you can also make an audible, if certain things come off the table, like you mentioned, that it's likely, even though we might have 18, we might get all those votes in there. And are they prioritized?
I think they are prioritized in our
when
ballot.
you fill out the form, it's your order priority, 1 through 15.
Okay.
And so I think, I feel like we've had a rich discussion tonight. We're not taking action tonight, so it's not like we're going to vote on a 15, but
Right.
that's why we've got you as our representative, is to make the really tough decisions in the moment and based on what's happening at the Legislative Assembly next weekend.
It was really hard for me to narrow it down to this group of 20.
It's
And the trade-offs that I was making around my dining room table is, whoa, but, it's incredibly difficult. So,
Thanks.
Well, I appreciate this process because when I landed in your position 3 years ago, I was flying blind, and so I had to base it on prior conversations of things that I thought our board was. So we've had this process improved each year, and I'm really pleased with where it's at right now, and I hope this process can continue into future years. So,
and if I
although, maybe we won't need a legislative assembly someday.
who knows?
Nice.
But if I can, a hat tip to Washington State PTA, who trained me on how to approach a legislative assembly and prepare for one. So I was only able to tackle this because of the 2 years I've spent with them. So
Great. We'll have fun at the event. I think it's really fun. I like it. I went the last 2 years, and I'm sorry I can't be there again this year, but trust you'll do an awesome job. Okay, so we're ready to move on from that one. The next section is number 4, full governance process monitoring and language review. And we have 2 items, and I think, are these both, one is about staff compensation, the other is about staff evaluation and instructional practices. And it looks like we have Director Bergstrom here.
Good evening. Tonight we are bringing our monitoring report for OE4, salaries and compensation, staff compensation. There are 3 main priorities within OE4. The first is to develop compensation benefit plans that attract and maintain the highest quality staff and reward employees consistent with the applicable marketplace with organizations of comparable size and type within available resources. We've managed to achieve that for the vast majority of our staff tonight by approving the contract for the MIEA for both certificated and classified staff. We will most likely in November be bringing a much more in-depth comparison of where we sit with surrounding districts in terms of certificated and classified and non-represented salaries.
When did you say that would be?
November, December.
Okay, great.
It will be for some of the positions, it will be a large lift to obtain a comparable group for all those positions, because if we have a lot of singleton positions, being a small district, we have a lot of staff that wear many hats, and so trying to find a good comparison means we need to establish some type of percentage of fit. So we're working on that as trying to find the applicable marketplaces so that we can have a good, solid comparison for our staff. The second principle is to ensure district funds are allocated to support staff who apply for National Board Teacher Certification. We are still applying those resources to the staff. And principle 3, to comply with all provisions of the Federal Labor Standards Act, RCW Chapter 4158, and Board Policy 5415. We are in compliance with Principle 3 in terms of Fair Labor Standards Act, as well as all of our policies and principles. So, any questions?
Let's see. I will certainly vote in compliance and appreciate all the work that you've done, especially with respect to the, what do you call that thing we just approved today?
Contracts?
Contract, thank you. Nice. And also appreciate the mentioning of bringing some additional data next month. I would like to suggest that just on a yearly basis, we consolidate all the public information. The salary schedules are public, and we just take a radius of 30 miles, whatever the driving distance from Mercer Island, and we plot BA plus 15, years 0 to 30, all 15 districts. Granted, there's going to be different buckets, but you can put those buckets in there. And then also there's some variance because they're on different years of the contract, and people might front load or back load, but that could also be indicated on a color type of thing. And I know, we all know, we try our best to be, as Director Lurie mentioned, as competitive as possible with that pay, while also keeping the students first, while also being sustainable. But having that information public, consolidating it, will show to our constituents that we are, in fact, highly compensated, or offering highly compensated packages to the extent that we can. So I think that would really, it's public information anyways, and showing out there, I think would benefit that. So thank you for suggesting that.
Any questions on this one? Okay, and I think because this was a one that staff is reporting on and the superintendent is determining compliance, we can just do this in one motion, not 3 separate ones. You guys agree with that? Okay. So if there's a motion out there, somebody wants to throw out there?
So moved.
Great. So the motion is to approve the OE4 monitoring report. Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion passes 4-0. And next we have OE5, staff evaluation and instructional practices. Thank you, Ty. And Fred's a turn. And there are 2 documents on there. Are they the same thing?
They're the same thing.
Okay.
One of them isn't working, and maybe that's why it got
Okay,
duplicated.
one's a
there.
PDF. Okay.
So this OE has to do with making sure that we're in compliance with staff evaluations and our instructional practices. And the second component to this is the level 2 monitoring that you have asked for. So kind of looking at the different pieces on, maybe we just take one, skip 2 and do the others, the 1, 3, 4, and 5. Ensuring that all employees' performance is effectively evaluated as directed by state law and our negotiated agreements. We have completed all of our evaluations from last school year, and those were recorded and put on file in the district office for all employees. Using our best practices for pre-assessment, formative, and summative. While this continues to be work that we're doing, we are trying to strive and working with all of our students. I think delivering best instructional practices, this is certainly going to be a goal coming up in the next several years with our professional learning as we're working on that. and growing as a district, and then providing instructional support that encourages a variety of teaching styles. This is contained in many of the fundamentals. When we look at our Level 2 report, some of this you may remember from last year. We're building upon our instructional frameworks. One change that we made this year that is noted in there is we did shift our evaluation method for our principals. Until last year, we were using Marzano's framework, and we switched to the Association of Washington School Principals last year. So Superintendent Koloski and I were evaluating principals on a new model, which better aligned with our teaching practices model as well. So we do have comments and commentary in there. There is a small quantitative table that you will see, which outlines the number of students who were on the comprehensive cycle versus the focused. And just a reminder, the difference is teachers and certificated staff who are on the comprehensive cycle, they're evaluated in all 8 sections of the, or each of the 8 criterion within the TPEP model, and those who are on focused get to choose and focus on just one of those. And so new teachers to the profession are on that comprehensive cycle for 4 years. Teachers who are coming to us from another district are generally on it for at least 2 years, and then you're on the focus cycle for 3 years, and then you're back to comprehensive. So you can see the numbers of of teachers and certificated staff. We've tried to kind of keep it into thirds or fourths just for ease of caseload for our evaluators, and then you can see down below the percent of teachers on each of those as well. So just a quick high-level overview of where our teachers and certificated staff stand. So any questions?
I have a question.
Yes.
Do you know the history of why we have Level 2 monitoring for item 2?
I do not know what the history is in terms of why that one's been there. It's historically, it's just been on there. I don't know the history
I
on
was
that.
wondering if it had to do with the change over to TPEP and Marzano that may have happened in the
It could have been. That was 2012 to 2013, I believe. It was the spring of 2013 when we were part of the RIG grant, the Regional Improvement Grant down with the ESD, which means 2013-14 school year, my first in the district office would have been that first year. So
for which?
For TPEP. That's when it came on board.
I thought it was earlier than that, because I was a teacher in the district, and I thought
TPEP, as
we
far
had
as
been a pilot
yes,
before that.
right.
Okay.
And we had always used Danielson, and that was a self-choice versus other districts who were not using the 4-point rubric. So that goes back to 2008, 2009, I believe.
Okay. So I'm just wondering then if, throwing it out there as if it was based on a new evaluation program that the board wanted more detail, if we're perhaps at a point where it's fairly comfortable and we might not need this level of detail in future reports. So that's a question I'm throwing out to staff and the board. Do we need this? Is it cumbersome? Is it it's just a question I thought I'd pose.
Yeah. It's a good question. I think, I wonder if it's best everybody thinks about it, and then maybe the administration can come back when we normally just review it, the next thing. And then we could also find out maybe more about the history of why. Yeah.
Sound good? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions for anybody else about this one? And so were you suggesting at the beginning, Fred, that we approve 1, 3, 4, and 5 first and then 2 separately? Did I hear you say
I think that would be up to you. I was just going to go through the 1, 3, 4, and 5 just because they're on level 1 and then come back to level 2. So
okay,
I think you can approve them either way.
All the way through. Okay. Get it done? All right. Waiting for a motion.
I move that we approve OE5 Staff Evaluation Monitoring Report.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, motion passes 4-0. Thank you very much. Next up, we have the consent agenda.
Make the motion to approve it.
Second?
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Consent agenda is approved, 4-0. And next, we have superintendent announcements. Donna?
I just have a couple of announcements. The WASDA annual conference is scheduled for November 14 through 17, and the theme for 2018 is Embrace Your Influence, and you are all registered, and you should be receiving individual confirmation emails. So it might just so that we can keep track of everything when you get that email, if you wouldn't mind forwarding it to Kendall, so she has all of that all in one place. And then you might have noticed that the WASDA 2018 Fall Regional Meeting for Area 2, which is this area, is scheduled for October 27th. That's a Saturday. And again, if you plan on attending that, there is a sign-up for it. And if you would just let Kendall know, she'll get you signed up, and there's a small fee for that meeting as well.
But I have to mention, it's really nice that it's on a Saturday, because sometimes traveling in the evening hours to these meetings has been cumbersome. So I think it's great that it's on a Saturday.
I think this one's in Bothell.
It's in...
It's north.
Yeah, Bothell. That's right. Anything else?
That's all.
Right. Next we have, and I will be attending that one, so if anybody wants to go with me. Next we have board assignments, board announcements, inquiries, and reports, starting with board assignments. And thank you, Donna, for putting this together. And you've updated it with the high school information. Great, thank you. How do you want to, on this, do you want to?
The only referencing back to the superintendent report, you can see that we did put the superintendent community advisory on here with that separating of the two groups. So if that is something that you want to assign a liaison to, absolutely that's fine. But if it's just one more thing on the plate that is too much as well, we can always report back on that to the board also. So I'm going to leave that up to the directors as to whether or not there's a board liaison for that specific advisory.
And hopefully you've all had a chance to take a look at these dates and times for any conflicts and preferences. I did email Director D'Souza and got some input from him on his availability, so I'll share that as part of mine.
Does he want to do all of them? I'm just joking.
Only if they're on Monday and Thursday. Okay, would anyone like to start with their preferences?
I'm a believer in terms of mixing up the liaisons on the schools in terms of changing every year, just so we don't get too comfortable. And I have not done either West Mercer or Northwood, so that would be my preference, just to have that experience.
And I, since January, have been, or December, the representative for the high school. I've enjoyed it. I've learned a lot. I would love to keep doing it. That time is challenging for me. So if someone wants to take it, I'm okay with that. So just timing-wise of my day, either things that meet less often or, to the end of the day, like the 3:15s or the 4 o'clocks, it's a lot easier for me to get to. I agree with switching around. I still feel like I'm new to everything, so I don't feel a burning desire to change anything. But since there's fewer, I would be interested in the superintendent community advisory, and be able, well,
Let's start with schools first.
Oh, the
if you don't mind.
schools?
Mhm.
Okay, then I'm happy to keep the high school unless someone wants it, but the timing is challenging. So if someone wants to make a change with one of the schools that meets later in the day.
Is there a preferred time that another school?
Well, the Island Park and Northwood are both at 4 o'clock, middle school's at 3:15 on their days. I see that, and I just want to make sure this is right. Northwood, there's only 2 meetings in the year? Is
Last year, I was the liaison there, and they had modified their pack. They had some low turnout, and so they modified it to be a principal's coffee. And so I'm not sure if that's just a response to participation, or that's what they decided was going to work, and maybe the PTA is more active. So I'm not sure, but I think you checked those dates, right?
Yeah, so I mean, that timing is better for me.
So I'm fine with either Northwood or Island or West Mercer timing. So if Northwood is better for you, why don't I take West Mercer, assuming nobody else wants West Mercer?
That sounds good.
Okay. And that's also assuming you're okay giving up the high school, or you could do both.
Well, and we, let's go through more people, and then we'll see what's left over, because we have 5 of us and 6 schools, and so we'll need someone to double up. So, Brian, how about you?
I'm pretty flexible during the day, so the high school wouldn't be an issue for me. Well, and you've already covered West Mercer, which I wouldn't want to necessarily sit in on that pack because I'm a parent there. So, yeah.
So I have done most of the schools now. I haven't done Island Park or Islander Middle School, but I had been a teacher at Islander Middle School, so I've been kind of saving that for a while. And I think the Monday doesn't, wait a minute, Monday, Islander Middle School. Yeah, so I could do either Island Park or Islander Middle School. But I think I'd really like to do Island Park first. So if that's okay with everybody else. And then David said he can do Monday and Thursday anytime, and then on the other days he can do during school hours, so he's pretty flexible. So he could do Lake Ridge or Northwood or
Islander Middle.
Islander, which he just had, I believe.
I think so.
And I think he's, yeah, so we could give him
Lake Ridge.
Lake Ridge. Let's give David Lake Ridge.
Sure.
And so Brian, do you have a preference, or do you want to do 2?
I can do 2.
You're good with 2?
Yeah.
Okay, that would be great. I appreciate that, because I did 2 last year.
So just to confirm for the schools, for Lake Ridge is Director D'Souza. For Island Park is Director Drinkwater. For Northwood is Director Lurie. For West Mercer, Director Jorgensen. And for Islander Middle School and Mercer Island High School is Director Jeannie Upton.
Great. Okay. So then we're
Actually,
looking... Yeah?
I would be interested in perhaps a more active school.
Ah.
And perhaps we should, since Northwood has chosen not to be particularly active, we should double up there.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
Not that I need to be the one to double up. I could.
Okay. What do you suggest then?
I had hesitated to take the middle school last year because
You have a dog.
I'm a parent there. I don't feel the same need to keep as much distance now that we've been there. So I'm happy to do that, the middle school, and let Brian do the high school. Is that?
Okay.
Works for
Or
me.
if you wanted to do Island Park, I could do Island, or if you wanted.
Either way,
I'm fine either way.
yeah.
Okay, so what did you suggest again? You're
So
gonna
I'll do
Islander?
the middle school.
And
Okay.
Northwood?
Sure. Unless someone else wants to take it. I can't, I mean, it's 2 meetings.
Yeah.
It's-
That'd be great, Deborah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Okay, so then we've got PTA Council, and I'm just going to start using the acronyms: SCA, SEAC, and STLA. Now, Donna, you had said that the Community Advisory, the SCA, we don't necessarily need to have someone go to, but if somebody would really like to do that, let's leave that to the end, if you don't mind. So is there any preference for PTA Council, the Equity Advisory, or the Teaching and Learning Advisory on anyone's part?
I would love to continue through a second year, especially with the transition from the diversity to equity.
Okay. Any objections to that? Okay. I would really like to do the Teaching and Learning Advisory, the STLA. No one objects to that.
Sounds good.
I'd like to do the community advisory.
Any takers for PTA Council?
I'll take it.
Okay, thank you very much.
So just to review and confirm, so we get all the names in the right places, the PTA Council will be Director Jorgensen. The Community Advisory, which we're also calling the Key Communicators, is Director Lurie. The Equity Advisory is Director Janini Upton, and the Teaching and Learning Advisory is Director Drinkwater.
Great.
Thank you all.
Thank you all too. And one piece of advice I have is to get these on your calendar right away. Last year, there was one like the day after this meeting, and I missed it because I hadn't gotten them on my calendar, but it looks like there aren't any on September 14th, are there?
No, the
Okay,
first
good.
meeting is the PTA Council, but they've actually delayed their meeting because of a conflict on the calendar, so it's on the 26th of September.
Great. And then a lot of them start in October, it looks like.
Yes.
Awesome.
And then just a reminder that if you can't make it that day, just feel free to throw that up to other board members, because it's nice to have that continuity.
Great, thank you. So now we move on to regular announcements and reports. Brian?
Well, I've been locked in my home for the last couple weeks, going through Legislative Assembly. But dates to keep in mind, in October and November, the WASDA Legislative Committee and Board of Directors are going to consider that ample priority ranking and adopt the 2019 legislative platform. So they'll be working on that through October and November. November 16th through the 19th, the 2019 legislative priority platforms will be launched at our annual conference. So we'll have it there, and then put on your calendars January 14th. It will be the 2019 legislative session. Will be beginning. So we're all kind of gearing up for that. And then we'll have dates for our legislative conference coming up and the Day on the Hill. It would be great if we could all spend a day on the Hill together.
And that's the 14th.
I think that's when their legislative session is going to begin for the next year. So I'll find those dates for the Day on the Hill. And there's the legislative conference is the first day. It's that weekend. So I think it's a Saturday or a Sunday. I think typically a Sunday when all three groups will get together. And then Monday we take to the Hill.
Thank you. Okay. Deborah?
Well, it's been exciting with school starting. I've heard lots of very positive things in the community. lots of happy kids and happy parents that their kids are back at school. And I know that we got an email, and also in terms of the public comment today, that I think we should talk about, or whether it's today or we put it on the agenda for the next meeting, about whether or not we're going to support the proposition?
Proposition
1.
And what we would need to do would be to schedule a discussion, so we can. Did you have more to add? Or
No, I just think that we should
Okay.
discuss it.
So we could do that now. Do we have enthusiasm for taking on? So we would need to schedule a public hearing and allow the public to weigh in with their opinions on the idea of the school board endorsing Proposition 1. And then at that meeting, we would then have a discussion and vote on that. Is that right?
Can we put it on the agenda for the next meeting, or do we need, I mean, I think that that's timing-wise. I mean, obviously, I'm sure they would assume the earlier the better.
I also think it probably would make sense for our president to touch base with, if it's appropriate, their campaign to ensure that they know what comes with this, because it does open the microphone for a public hearing. And in our school levies, we traditionally just go for the individual endorsements of, I think I shouldn't say we, I think the campaigns on school levies have traditionally gone with endorsements of the individual council members, as opposed to going and asking for an open microphone public hearing at the city. I would imagine it's because we didn't want our whole budget being discussed at a city council that wasn't prepared to talk about that. So you might want to confirm with them, because they may have been thinking we could do it without a public hearing. So
I can do that, absolutely. But if there are no objections, I think it sounds like we've had 2 inputs today, at least, that we should address this. So I think we could put it on the next meeting's agenda, and we can work on that at our next agenda planning, or sooner, to adjust things timing-wise, and allow for that. Yes?
I do have one question in regard to a conflict of interest. As somebody who has privately endorsed, moving forward, it feels odd voting on whether or not to have a public hearing in that case, because I'm already marked publicly as being not impartial. Like, I already have kind of am swayed one way myself anyway, and that is public knowledge. So I want to make sure that that's out, and I want to be open about that.
And that's the case for some of us. So I think we could disclose that at the meeting, and certainly as private citizens, one can endorse something, but then it's a different thing to work together as a body to endorse something, and so that would be what the hearing would be about. But I think it would be fine to disclose that at the meeting.
I'm wondering, since we do have an attorney with the district here, if there's anything, and I don't want to put them on the spot at all. Is there anything that we've said that's cringeworthy?
I don't think there's anything that's cringeworthy. Essentially, you're saying that you want to schedule a time to discuss whether or not this is something that you as a group or board would want to endorse or support publicly as a whole, while simultaneously disclosing your individual or personal, I guess, leanings, I don't know, prior public support on an individual basis. So I think that's appropriate. It's not something you should be doing, obviously, in private, so public would be the appropriate place for that. So.
And looking at the calendar, I'm wondering, what are our next, we have a September.
We have September 27th as our next regular meeting, and we do have study session attached to the beginning of that, starting at 4:30.
And then the next meeting after that is October
11th.
Which is still before the.
It's a little late, though.
Okay.
I think it's, I think ideally we should do the 27th. Yeah, so I think if we're going to do it, we need to do it. It's the 27th. Okay. All right. So we'll work on that. And Ralph, do you have any reports?
No report other than I apologize for my emotion during the high cap discussion. As you can tell, I'm pretty passionate about some of those topics, but as I think back about it, it was maybe a little bit too passionate because I think I was kind of speaking for probably a number of people were agreeing, but I didn't really leave too much room for somebody to kind of disagree with me based on the passion I was sharing. So that's just wanted to share that.
Thank you. Okay. I don't have anything to report. So our next step is to move into an executive session pursuant to RCW 42.30.110(1)G to review the performance of a public employee. And the estimated time would be 30 minutes. So no final action will be taken, and we will reconvene the regular meeting for adjournment at the end of our time, so at approximately 9:39, and then from there we would adjourn. So that is all for now.
All right, you're recessed. Thank you.